Good evening. Welcome to our November 14th work session. If you'd like to please stand, we will say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now it's time for our statement of mission and vision.
Well, here we go.
Aaron.
You want an intro or?
Drum roll, please. Let's get serious about this because this is very serious. Richmond Schools, in partnership with the community, will help all children believe in themselves, respect others, and experience the joy of learning. Through effective teaching, children will first learn the basic skills, including thinking skills, using words, numbers, and ideas. In addition, children will be given the opportunity to learn more of what they want and need to know. Adults will model behavior that will teach children to resolve conflicts successfully, take risks with new ideas, and understand that they can err without being judged.
Thank you. Dixie?
The board vision, Richmond Community Schools will be a high-performing, well-respected school system that will make the community proud. Excellent student achievement, graduation rate, and attendance will be our hallmarks.
Thank you. Now we're on to public commentary.
It is time for the public to offer comments. In order for the public to feel welcome, we want to ensure that there is a system in place for you to not only address the board, but to receive comments. We want also to remind you that the protocol we have designed applies not only to this public body and venue, but to emails as well, and all board members do receive those. We ask that you speak only for 5 minutes, that you keep your comments polite and kind, and if indeed there is a need for an answer, the superintendent or staff will research and get back with you. So are there people wanting to address the board? At this time not. Then no. If there are at the end, you'll have another 5 minutes to do that.
Thank you. On to snapshots of success.
This week is American Education Week, and the board kicked off the celebration of American Education Week last Friday by establishing, instead of a teacher workday, a day off for employees. And judging from the response that I've received from employees, it was well received.
And gorgeous weather.
And beautiful weather. Thank you, board, for
we arranged that.
providing that. Also,
That was Linda's doing. I think she was in charge. Weren't you in charge of weather?
Mm-hmm. I talked to Mother Nature. It all worked out.
well, she listened. We also, for those of you who woke up Sunday morning to find that your paper had a wrap as in paper wrap around it.
We thought you were going to.
We can thank Bridget Hazelbaker, who's in our audience tonight. Bridget worked along with our total staff and the board to put together a wrap to Sunday's newspaper that thanked and recognized the entire staff of the Richmond Community Schools for all that went into making this year happen. And all of our staff was recognized in photographs. There was a letter from the board that had been written by the board commemorating that huge task that it took to get this year to happen and thanking all the staff. It was also the logo of the school corporation that was on the wrap. I don't know how all of you picked up your paper, but mine was rolled, and there at the doorstep, there was the big R.
It was perfect.
And thought that was a pretty nifty thing to wake up to on Sunday morning. But it's not over, and we have a proclamation that is in keeping with American Education Week, and I believe that Mrs. Morgeson has that, and she's prepared to read that, and the board will need to take a vote to authorize that.
Well, it is with obviously great pride that I read this proclamation to honor all of our dedicated employees that work with our children each and every day. Whereas America's schools form the foundation of our democracy, providing each new generation the wherewithal to serve as stewards for our nation's precious values of freedom, civility, and equality. And whereas schools are the primary influence in children's lives aside from their families, and whereas by equipping young Americans with both practical skills and broader intellectual abilities, schools give them hope for and access to a productive future. And whereas schools are community linchpins, bringing together adults and children, educators and volunteers, business leaders and elected officials in a common enterprise. And whereas the employees of the Richmond Community Schools work tirelessly and transparently to serve our children and community with care, professionalism, integrity, and the highest expectations. And whereas all efforts of the employees and all the resources of the organization are committed to the academic success of each student in every classroom, every grade level, and in every subject area. And whereas there is nothing more crucial to the social and economic health and the future of our community and nation than education. Now, therefore, we, the Board of School Trustees for Richmond Community Schools, do hereby proclaim November 11th to the 17th, 2012, as American Education Week.
Thank you, Mrs. Morgeson. Do I hear a motion of support?
So move.
Pat Heine makes the motion and Aaron Stevens seconds the motion. Comments or questions on this? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. On to reports and discussion topics, and first up is the 2012-13 District Strategic Plan.
Yes, in response to the board's action to approve a strategic plan, the administration is working right now to make sure that plan is implemented and also put in such a way that it can be measured along the timeline requested. We begin our CPAS conferences with schools as of tomorrow, so I anticipate that very soon we will begin talking at the board level then about some of these measurables. What you have, and if we could have brought up just the first page of that strategic plan, what we've done to put legs on this plan is to share with you strategies that we've developed to assure that we can make those targets or address those targets. There are I believe 6 focus areas, and then there are targets within those. Now, what you're seeing is the basic strategy. In almost every case, we have steps necessary, and we have designed those steps so that we have timelines with those steps and also people responsible. In some cases, these are cabinet members, but in some cases, they may be principals. In some cases, they may be directors. But we have multiple steps for each strategy. So what may look rather simple up there, for example, on that very first one, that there is nothing simple about that strategy. Implementation of the K-6 reading framework happens in every single classroom. Every principal has a stake in that. All of us work on that. And then, of course, there are benchmark assessments that we have. And, of course, that coincides with the CPAS 1, 2, 3, and then the summative ranking. So all of these targets by way of the strategies will be measured and reported to the board to coincide with these CPAS conferences. Now, I don't think it's necessary to go through all of these. Those are included in your packet, and they're on the website. But what we are prepared to do when we talk about these in the measurables discussions, the assessment discussions, we will be glad to show you how we've gone about through some of the steps that come up in discussion just naturally when we report on the assessments. But and not all the steps are in place. We're still working at putting some of our steps in place. But
Pat, as I was going back over the notes from our strategic planning session, I thought there were some of these target areas where we were going to gather community work groups to
3 and 6.
To really focus on a broader, more comprehensive set of strategies. And so I didn't know if that fit along with board committees that we're going to talk about later. And also, it really does fit some of the strategies that were suggested in the Race to the Top grant application. All of that would begin to blend. So what is the timeline for helping set those community work groups?
well, some of those community work groups will naturally come out in the action steps that we've put into the strategies. Now, I'd have to go back. You said 3 and 6. I need to.
Homeschool community partnerships
Assemble
and
community teams for focus areas 3 and 6 to create strategies, homeschool community partnerships,
and communication.
and customer stakeholder satisfaction and marketing.
Yeah.
Near future was timeline.
And we also were kind of encouraged us not to duplicate the communication group that already exists, but to work with that group to.
And I don't have our action steps committed to memory, and I don't have them in front of me. But I believe that Target 6.2 involves stakeholders, which would be a community group of some kind. And so those are involved. They're not necessarily involved at this point, and I can't tell you what the development per each of those strategies would be yet with the action steps, but that is part of it.
Yeah, it should. Yeah.
Well, along with that same thought, we also identified 3 that we felt were very urgent. And so I was wondering how that urgency is going to be dealt with through the strategies.
And you were talking about probably
Well, it's reading and behavior
Learning environment.
Right.
and standards, I believe.
Adherence to standards.
the action steps are taking place right now, particularly in focus area 2.
Safe and orderly learning environment.
Yeah, and at the next board meeting, we'll be able to talk about that one as we start talking about some of the results of CPAS. We won't have all the CPAS conferences complete by the next board meeting, but at the next board meeting, we can start talking about some of those areas that you had some urgency attached to and talk about where we are with those.
Pat? The other thing that I find, we spend an awful lot of time talking about our values, and then when I read these strategies, I didn't see the values integrated into those, and I don't know how best to make sure that when we're developing strategies and action plans, we're recognizing the values. And how to,
Okay.
with language and or.
We've already talked about that with all the principals, and as the school improvement plans are being redesigned this year, every one of them, every one of the points of action or the points of change are being linked not only to the goals, but also to the values. So you'll see a lot of the values
Kind of in a
embedded.
matrix? I mean, I could even see a rubric or something.
Maybe a rubric, but what they're doing is attaching all their action plans to that. I mean, their specific strategies are being linked to the values.
Good.
And what we're also looking to do is to highlight, these are not necessarily action plans, but we're wanting to highlight, we've asked them to talk about what it is that's happening in their buildings. Could be the result of some strategic plans, but it also could be the result of just working towards their annual goals that have already been established that could be linked to the values so that we can start attaching those to your chart and running those and reminding you of how your values are being played out on a daily level at the buildings.
Because how they're being played out would be an excellent marketing communication tool, because those are very powerful.
They are nice statements.
And they say a lot to parents about how we want to run our schools, not just the end result, but that this is the culture. And it states, I think it states very clearly what we believe. And we want to share that as much as possible.
I'm sorry, Linda?
I want to go back to the urgency ones, because I feel like there needs to be, during our session with Dr. Benjamin, I felt like the board was very adamant that these three areas need to be looked at with great urgency. And so I just don't want to lose that. And it seems as though that those three need to somehow be dealt with in a little different way than maybe the rest of them. Not that the rest of them aren't urgent, but I don't know what other people are thinking, but
It was more like that they're all important, but the rest of them we have more time to work on, but we don't have time. And it really focuses on the focus area 1 and 2, I think.
And part of our conversation was, how are we going to tell people we're working on them? Because there's an awful lot of kind of the rumor, the kind of buzz out there that says we have all these problems, and yet we know some of them are being worked on. So as much communication about how and what we're doing.
How are we working on
And
it?
how are we doing, and what are some of the results of working on them? Not just, we're working on them, but we've worked on this, and this is the change, this is how it's having an impact. So it's as much communication about how and what we're doing, and that's as important to staff as well as it is to parents, that the staff knows that this just isn't words on a page.
Well, and
Right? Isn't that what you're saying?
we have put some changes in place already. I don't know with a week that we can talk about too many results just yet. But one of the changes we put in place, for example, was to transfer at least half the day. One of the teachers from the Baxter building, the Community Youth Services, a teacher has been moved over into Vail to work with some of our students in a proactive way. We've identified some students who could use some one-on-one in the reading block. And so that teacher is working with kindergarten and first grade students, and then also third and fourth grade students who could use those one-on-one. And just the anecdotal review right now is that those students seem to be working through the rest of the day with a lot greater success than we had seen earlier. Now, that's just after the first few days. I would hesitate to say we're seeing fewer office referrals just yet, but it appears good right now.
That's the kind of story we need to hear.
What was she teaching at Baxter? I mean,
She was there for primary students, K-4.
Okay, they
For
were
our new
having
behavior.
difficulty. So why didn't she have more students?
Because there hadn't been that many assigned to the community youth services yet. So, and the number tends to rise throughout the year. So we thought until that number rises, why not have her working with students throughout the day? And that's very doable, and it's working. It was well received too. The other piece is this is both a good and bad. we have seen more use out of our community youth services at the intermediate level, much more in the last few weeks. So while that's good, there's also the flip side, and that is that there are several students who need some behavior adjustment, and that's where they're getting it.
And that's 5 through 8.
5 through 8, that's right. So it's too soon to say whether that's having the impact that we would like to think that it might, but we're maintaining those statistical monitors also. Am I leaving?
Well, and I think, too, that maybe this will give us an avenue for reporting some of that sense of urgency, because the high school collected their data on their students in terms of their reading and where they were, and I think that they were a little surprised by their data. But the sense of urgency in their response was to pull a team of teachers and coaches and the administrators together to say, how do we address this problem of students at the high school level who don't read at grade level? And in the time between the assessment in October and the start of second try this week, they've created 3 sections of Read 180 for students at the high school. So 45 students will be receiving additional support and specialized reading instruction at the high school level. And in doing that, then they were able to free up a special education teacher to provide 45 spots for students who have IEPs to receive specialized reading instruction as well. So the response was pretty urgent at the high school.
Pretty immediate, sounds good.
Linda, did you have?
Well, I just think that the intermediate school is a place where I think many of us have heard and have visited and so forth, that it seems as though the intermediate school needs some immediate attention. And I think that our conversation was much around the intermediate school. And, granted, it's a brand new configuration. We're really treating it right now as 2 schools, the 5th and 6th grade students and the 7th and 8th grade students. There's some support that probably is needed there. So I hope that, we need to look at the resources. Do they have enough resources to deal with all the students that they have? And so I hope that we can have a conversation about the intermediate schools, because I think that's at the forefront for many teachers and parents.
Is that a conversation that'll take place when we go over the CPAS? Aaron?
That's really scary, because that was almost exactly what I was going to ask about. And that is, again, when we talk about urgency, the urgency that I see is definitely in the intermediate school. You were talking about those issues that are now coming to fruition there, and I can pinpoint those on a number of things. But going back to the question is, do we need to reallocate resources to go to combat that? Because now's an urgent time for me. If these things are coming to fruition now's time to look and see if we need additional resources to assist, so we can curb it instead of letting it grow and then having to deal with the after effect of it.
I will also tell you that in the conversations we've had about the now, we've also been looking at the future and the past, because we think that there were some steps that we should have taken or might have taken or could have taken that we didn't take, even last spring. Now, granted, we were dealing with some huge transition issues last spring, but one of the issues that we know we will be doing better next year on than we did this last year would be just the orientation for students. Normally, we have, when the 6th graders go into 7th grade, we have a fairly significant orientation process. That didn't happen last year for the 4th graders who were becoming 5th graders and 5th graders who became 6th graders. We had an orientation, a brief orientation, but it was not the process that we normally have. And if you remember, we were packing, we were closing, we were reassigning, we had a lot on the table. And this year will be very different for the 4th graders going into the 5th grade. some of what the principals have talked to me about is that they're still doing some orientation work with those students, and it will probably happen even throughout the year. We will see some of that being done. Mr. Bryant has met with his students already. You know, I mean, it was in an orientation way. Naturally, that would happen because he's a new face there. But what you would normally expect to see at the beginning of the year will probably happen throughout the year in terms of reorienting students, and I think that that's in order. So we are having those conversations as well as ramping up some of the services provided by Community Youth Services. It's all coming together. Time will tell whether that's the strategy that will be most successful.
Chap?
Actually, I've kind of found the whole process just a little confusing for me. Going through the strategic plan and then talking about developing the targets and the goals, and I'm more of a simple, let's have this 90% goal and evaluate it and what can I fix it. So, I'm kind of interested in how this all comes together. But I guess as I was looking at these metrics and the way you've divided these up basically at the end of each of the test periods of the data, I guess I'm trying to figure out in this process, I feel as an individual board member that I'm usually the last one to know what the student data is. I mean, we've got the report cards from the school system in the paper before we got the official notice from the administration. I mean, we kind of had an idea where they're going to be. So I guess I'm looking, the timing of the data that we've talked about for the last couple of years is we've not, in my opinion, have not received the data soon enough for us to have any way to ask the right questions. Maybe that's the way to say that. The first try is complete now. I've kind of been waiting for the reading scholastic inventory for the 5th through 11th grade. 5th through 11th?
5th through 10th, 100%. 11th and 12th, not quite 100%.
Okay, well,
kids.
I thought it was going to be 100% 5th through 11th, but whatever.
Well, part of the reason is they're doing it through their English courses, and a lot of the 11th graders didn't have a first try English course.
Okay. So when we take a look at that data, one of the questions that I have are, for me to assess our urgency on reading, if our goal is K through 12 reading, are we going to get the data quick enough for us to be able to react?
Are you talking about the board reaction?
Well, yeah, because if board reaction and reallocation of resource or whatever we need, I mean, it's just, I have no clue what our average reading level turned out at the high school, but let's say it come out to 70%. Whether that's a good number or bad number or whatever, I think that would surprise a lot of people. So being aware of how we take that data to help us evaluate on these goals and getting the data in what I call a timely fashion, I don't know. Everything that it appears that we're going down is almost too far after the fact, I think. So I guess I just haven't got in my mind.
Well, it's a systems issue. I mean, you can have the numbers. You can have the numbers as soon as we get the numbers. But what do those, you've just said, what do those numbers mean? I have to ask myself the same thing. And so why we have the CPAS is so that we can talk this through with the staff and hear how they're reacting and what they're recommending as their next steps. This takes time, and we can't have just it. I wish that we could have all these conversations in a way that we can have them simultaneously with the numbers and have them ready at the next board meeting for reporting out. But it does take time. Our first one is tomorrow. They have to have time to sift through the numbers too, and to get their staffs together and walk through and see if there are any tweaks or changes in their program, and that's what they report to us. And that's what we compile and then report to the board after it's all been done. And yes, there is some lag time there. I admit that, for us as well. But the staffs have to process this, and it takes a few days for that to happen.
Well, I guess my response to that is we had the same conversation last year. Or it might have been a little longer than a year ago, when I went to the trouble to create some kind of a template, and we talked about reporting out and timing, and we were looking at 6-week increments, and the conversation or the response that I received at that time was within a week or two, then the data could be in your hands, whether we've had that conversation or not. And then we've had the other pieces of the conversation of the CPAS data. We used to receive the CPAS data years ago, but then it was more geared, that data was more geared to help the teachers and the principals understand what they needed to do to direct the direction of what they need to do for instruction. And it really didn't mean much to us, because that's not what we use the data for. So we kind of got away from the CPAS. So I guess I'm just trying to figure out, in this whole oversight role that we have, how are we going to receive the data in a way that's going to help us help you, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Let's let him answer first.
And what you're going to see is exactly what we see. You'll see the tables, you'll see the acuity scores, you'll see the other scores that we try to put with that. You may even see attendance. And then you'll see the responses that the schools have made to what they're viewing. You'll see it through their eyes and the steps they're taking. And we are going to try to put that in as simple a framework as possible.
Pat?
Well, I've been trying, the question of oversight and our role, I thought was addressed well by Dr. Benjamin when he said, we don't need, as a board, the raw data. What we need is their analysis of the data, and then we take that. And I think that's what you're trying to say to us. So our role, the timing of our role is pretty complex, because we do have to wait until the analysis so that you can have the comprehensive view, so that then we can begin to reallocate resources. We already heard what the high school did.
So they can make recommendations based on their
Exactly.
analysis.
And so the recommendations are what we need to hear. And oh, yes, we may need to look at the data that backs that up. But that's a little different role, it seems to me, than what Jeff is asking for. And so when I listened to Dr. Benjamin, I thought ours truly was to sit back and look at the comprehensive picture that you're going to present based on the data as you understand it. Is that kind of, am I assuming correctly what he was saying to us?
I wasn't in that last conversation that he had with you, but my plan is to share with you those discussions, which would be the aftermath of their analysis per building. And if we feel that they're off track in their analysis, that's what we discuss with them at that point.
Right. That's your role. That's your responsibility.
Seldom are they off base. Most of the time when they come to us, they have washed that through their staff. They have looked at that through their coaches, if they have them, and they all do now. So I look for that to be a fairly good conversation. But I don't know how to do that to get it closer to the time that you're talking about and give them ample time to have that response. CPAS has been on the table now for a few years, but we always put that in their calendar soon so that they understand what's expected of them too.
Pat, or not Pat, I'm sorry, Linda. I did that once before.
Well, I think I understand what Jeff's saying, in that we often get data. For instance, we've gotten M-class, we've gotten some acuity, and so we kind of get it here and there. But then it's kind of like you wonder, we have to wonder when we see things that raise the red flag, and we hope that things are progressing and changes are being made to accommodate those scores that are in need of help. It's kind of like a report card. If you wait until after you give the report card to a child to begin to make changes, it's almost too late.
But isn't
And-
that an argument for us not getting the data until after they've had a chance to analyze it in a way? Then kind of, because as you said, we get the report card and we react to it before they've had a chance to give us the what has
Well, I would
happened in
hope that a
response.
lot of work had gone in before you actually get the report card. There's a lot of changing in instruction and so forth with a child. You don't want to wait till you give the parent the report card to think, well, what are we going to do now?
I understand that,
you
but
know.
they need to collect it all too.
So
Isn't that what this is? The report, it shows the different scores and then the strategies. Isn't that what we're looking for, is the actual information that goes in this plan, right?
I think so. I don't
And
know.
I
I
think
haven't
that's
ever
what-
been through this.
But I thought that was what you said.
That's what we're hoping for. We're part of the report card. The report card to the board is more than just the data.
Yes.
The report card to the board is data and analysis, and then requests for any changes in resource allocation as there may be. But a lot of the resource allocation will have been made at the building level before they even talk to me about it. I mean, the principals aren't going to wait.
Well, like you said, the
if,
high school already.
Yeah, they're going to put some plans in place, and if I tell them that that's way off base, we'll relook at that. But like I said, in most cases, they see the data coming in, and they make in-flight adjustments at that point. All the buildings do that. And what we're wanting to show you is what's happening in the building. It's a snapshot, but it's what's happening in the building at that point. So the data is part of the picture, but it's the discussion about the data that's so important, and I think that that's important for all of you to see how we're responding.
Well, I guess, I can keep an open mind as we go forward. But my problem, I'm trying to figure out, I really want to work in my understanding of the policies that I agree with or disagree with based on data. I really want to, it's in our goal, make our decisions based on data. So I guess I just want to make sure that I'm using benchmarks and data and making decisions that are, real time and not like Linda had talked about a minute ago, when the report card's done and the school is over. So that's part of the reason why we had the discussion last year, was that same thing. I mean, if by the middle of CPAS 2 will probably be our first report.
By the middle of
Well,
CPAS 2.
Middle of next trimester.
I thought we were going to have it sooner than that.
You'll probably,
After the
you can
discussions.
have some of that next, well, I'm not sure. When is the last CPAS? Do you remember, Pam?
Sometime in December, but I don't know the exact date.
So we're halfway through. So really, I just want to make sure that the benchmarks and the data is timely, and because often I don't think it is. So and that's just me. I'm not trying to put the blame on anybody, but I'm always the type of person that if we've tested all of if we've already completed our reading inventory for the majority of the 5th through 11th grade, then why hold that data from us? Why
Well,
don't
and
you
you're
go ahead
saying
and
we
give
can
it?
get the data, but what you're trying to have are the conversations with each of the buildings, and then also then taking all of that in, you need to make more of a systematic assessment
That's
of
part,
where we
I mean,
are.
that's how we see, that's what we see as our responsibility.
Yeah.
Showing you not just the data, but how we're responding to it.
And I respect that, but I also think it gives us better information to have a conversation with you if we're already familiar with the data when we have the conversation.
I agree with that.
I mean,
And we do
us
plan to
getting
have that too.
Us getting the information when we come to a board meeting and to discuss it and not have a time to think about it doesn't help me do my job as a board member.
So you want the CPAS like right now?
I'm not
Well,
saying I
it
want
could
to
be
pass,
that
but
maybe we need like a midterm, if you will, report. Or, I'd hate to say report, but, for instance, it's like at the high school. It would give me great comfort in knowing that we have X number of students that are not where they need to be with reading, and this is what we are doing right now. We have X number of students that did not do well on their math dibbles, and so I know that like time tests have been instituted and things of that nature. So I know that things are happening, but it's that we don't necessarily know that those are happening, because I get the M-class dibbles and I see from the beginning of the school year, I see a lot of red, but I'm not going to hear anything until CPAS 1. And so, it's like I think I need some discussion to go along with what I have received so that I can do whatever I need to do.
Well, the system that we've put in place works along these timelines. Some of you have requested information out of the sequence, and so we're not prepared to give you the feedback that you're talking about. You only get the raw data, which encourages or incites questions and concerns. So what we're trying to do is accomplish two different needs, I guess. And we don't have the problem with sharing data with you, but we can't give you the full package, which is data plus analysis, except
Not just
when
building
we've
by
had that.
building, but also, because where we come in, I think, more often than not, is when you've had that full analysis of the entire system and you see common threads where that's where resources may need to be shifted, more than likely. So I don't know what the answer is as far as, getting us the data is one thing, but as you said, Linda, you're going to see that and you're going to go, ooh, that's a red flag. I wonder. And their stuff is happening, but we also don't want to, I think, ask for so many reports that all they're doing is reporting out to us and not.
I'm not asking for reports. I am wanting to ensure that our students are getting
Sure.
everything. And
We
to
all want
me, waiting until, if I'm not going to get the CPAS until January, you talk about resources and reallocating, kids are going to start, our students are going to start taking I-STEP in February.
Yeah.
To me, that's a little late.
What they're saying is they're not waiting, though, and so I guess we need to decide what it is, what proof is it that we need to have that shows that they're not waiting. Is
Well,
that what
I
you're
know
asking
that this
for?
board talked about real-time data.
Well, and we
that
can get
was
the
an
data.
important, so I guess we need to come together and figure out what that means, what this means,
Mm-hmm.
and what it means to the job that we have to do.
Yeah, but like you said, you got the data. The problem is we didn't. Now we want to know, what did you do about the data?
As I listen
And
to this
before
conversation,
CPAS.
I worry a little bit that some of what we're asking is to step into a teacher's role, because
No, not me.
well, but when we get some of those red flag data, and we ask a question, how do we let you all know that, how do we let you have the time to respond? I trust that our administrators and our teachers are responding to that data in a way that will get somewhere else. Where does the role of, waiting and trusting that it's happening, surely they're not waiting until we respond to that data before they do something in the
Right.
building. So your question is, what proof
What do we want to have
use?
midterm, or when the QD comes out? What is it that we want to have along with the data, so that we feel comfortable that they've reacted? What do we want them to give us? That's
Well, and the simple answer to that is maybe we need to see if we can tighten up our schedule for the CPAS conferences with the buildings. that's easier said than done.
Yeah.
Right.
And I know that Pam has worked at that, just trying to get them in as quickly as possible, and they're still out into December. And we'll work to see if we can bring that together a little more closely.
Well, if we look at focus area 1 that we had identified as one of the areas of urgency, that's reading. I mean, so, and by no means am I a teacher or want to act like a teacher, but I guess I just need to figure out, like I said, I'm still wrapping my head around the process that we're going through, the strategic planning, because we're actually essentially, this is what we're supposed to evaluate you and your fellow directors on, and half the year is over already. So by the time we get our head wrapped around this, then it's not going to be fair to evaluate anyone, because you didn't know what you were going to be evaluated on. So, that's the other part that I look at. I hear questions about people are not sure on what direction we're going and who's going to do this and who's going to do that, and yet then we got to evaluate the teachers. So, if I'm in this kind of chaos myself, you're in this kind of chaos. What kind of chaos is the teachers in? So, I'm just trying to get my head wrapped around this, and how is the data going to flow so it makes sense for us.
Well, we're in an implementation period, and I don't feel we're in chaos. Maybe there are some others who would disagree with me, but it seems to me that we're going through the steps necessary to put this plan into place. We did want the plan to be in place in June. That was your first, I mean, that's what we were shooting for. It's no one's fault that it happened to be last month. We don't consider that to be a real problem, because we've begun working on the goals that we need to get those 90% goals met. But as I'm listening to you, the only thing I can say is that we will do what we can to reduce the timeline between the release of the data and the analysis of the data. We will try to get that to you more closely as we can to the release of the data.
Linda?
Well, I guess since the board asked for 3 of these focus areas to be considered urgent, there was a reason why we ask for those to be looked at with urgency. So I guess I have to ask, why was it that we asked that? How did we know to ask that? Because I would hope it's based on data that we have seen, and perhaps it was based on some conversations that have been held. But obviously, there is a reason why we ask for those areas to be looked at with urgency. And so, I don't feel like that by asking for data and supporting data that I am trying to do the work of the administration or the teachers by any means. I want to be supportive of what the needs of the kids are. And so, I just felt I needed to say that, because there's a reason why we ask for those 3 areas to be looked at with urgency.
Well, and I guess, would you say that it is being looked at with urgency?
I can say that it is.
Right, so I
can
guess
say that
then
we've
I'm
already
back to
put,
my question. What do we need to have in our hands to prove that? Because
The problem
what
that I'm
I think
seeing
we're
is that
saying is
we have a lot of different opinions about what we need to satisfy us as a board, not a board opinion. And it's hard for administration to come up with something that's going to please us, because we don't all agree on what we need.
But if we can get the numbers, and like I said, I have every confidence that you guys are reacting in an urgent manner, because I know how, at least the folks that I've observed, and I know you've observed it too, they understand the urgency. But because of the time that it takes, I know, to get everyone in a room, talk through what have you done, you all have a chance to not only analyze that from the building to building, but more importantly, district-wide. So, and I understand what you're saying. We want to be participating in the urgency. We know it's important. We said so. So, with the CPAS conversations, and I get it, that it's going to take a while to get all this together to be able to give a district picture. But, so I guess, could we think a little bit about what demonstrates the urgency? Like we heard anecdotally about the high school, what their reaction was. Is that what we need? Do we need that anecdotal evidence in an interim way? What would satisfy us, I guess, is what I'm saying, until they've had the opportunity to give us the entire picture. Would it help us to have some of those
And the
clips?
anecdotal evidence that doesn't just feel like it's thrown in. I mean, part of it is, maybe we do need for each of our meetings under district strategic plan, we need some reactions or responses. Because we're also, remember, when we were putting that plan together, we're very concerned that the public understands that we are responding to the sense of urgency. And so this is a great bully pulpit. This is a great place to get that kind of information out, if it's in a more structured, formalized way. That was an aside that Dr. Parker offered, so maybe it's that would be
As you
helpful.
have your CPAS conversations, maybe building to building, maybe you pull out those gems, or someone, maybe not you, maybe someone else is responsible for saying, hey, after the Star Academy meeting, give me 3 highlights of the things that you noticed from your data and 3 things that you are doing to react to them, so that I can share that with the board. Would that be helpful?
I think it would be.
That gives us an interim that isn't maybe too complicated for you all to do, something they would probably do anyway when they prepared the report to you. Then we feel more confident, or we have evidence that something's moving, and then are able to wait until we get the entire picture.
Just so that I'm clear on what you're talking about, or what you're wanting to see happen, between those reporting periods, we've established there are reporting periods for this plan.
For district.
For the
level.
district. Are you wanting to see anecdotal evidence that we're moving on those 3 areas that you've talked about?
The urgency.
The target areas of 1, 3, and 6?
Reading.
And you did it somewhat tonight when you talked about safe and orderly learning environment, and moving someone from, those are the sort of things we need to know, because we're hearing out in the
public,
schools
yeah.
and in the public that there is a concern. So when you tell us I'm dealing with it, this is what we're doing. That is what we
But
need.
be sure to connect it back to this conversation, because sometimes we don't always I don't always connect those dots. It's helpful if you say.
Connect it.
Well, and not only do we need to hear it, the
It's the public
community
that
needs
needs
to
to
hear
hear
it.
it
That's
more
the
than
important
anything.
part.
So if
that
you want to report
They
it-
know that
Yeah.
there is an active engagement, and there is an urgency in these 3 areas. We know we have
Sure.
problems.
And we've
Well, and the
already
staffs also need to know it, and know that we are looking at it very carefully, and that hopefully changes are coming their way.
And in talking about our agenda, we talked about it being a part of each meeting. So that would be an
It'll
easy way.
be on every agenda.
Right. It'll be an easy way to report out to the public and to us about what is going on in those
So-
areas that are a priority.
Just to be clear for you, when the raw data becomes available, is that something you guys want?
Well, I guess I didn't bring it, I was looking, because I usually carry it with me. I was looking at the assessment calendar, and that's what drove the conversation we had last year. And I'm going to, because we've talked about it, I'm going to use the Read 180 Scholastic Reading Inventory, is that what you call that? What would have been great is if what's completed, once that was completed now, I don't know when it was completed, sometime in October, I think. What would have been great, my vision, is that's a simple report, 5th through, at least in my vision again, 5th through 11th, and, we've got 60% or 80% of the kids reading at grade level, and then we've got 20% that's 20 below, or whatever the breakdown is. That's a really easy, I would think, generated report of the outcome of that test. Then, coming to the board meeting, an action plan of discussion. You guys received the data of the reading, Scholastic Reading 180. Some of the things that we're doing at the high school is because of that, one of the reactions is we've created 3 Read 180 classes. Well, I'm happy. That's all I need.
Yeah, it's not as difficult as we're making.
Yeah, I'm not trying to make it. I'm not trying to make the presentation to me with data like your CPAS. 2.3, 0.1, 0.4, 0.8, 0.9. Whatever the standards are that you break it down to. I'm not interested in data that defined, but if the test is 5th through 11th, and just assume it's 100% of all those students, of our 7th graders, and even to break it down at a building level wouldn't be difficult, 20% of them are on grade level, or 80% of them are on grade level. Here's the reaction. That gives me data that's time, and that allows me to ask the question. Then when you're telling me that you're creating 3 Read 180 classes at the high school, I'm smart enough to know that that's a response. I'm doing my job.
So basically, always receive the data when you guys
Just
get
follow
it,
the
I guess.
assessment calendar.
And then don't talk about it, don't discuss it until we hear the analysis of the data and the steps in place to
Respond
to
to it.
respond to it.
Yeah.
Because our job is to react at that system-wide level. That's our job.
Which is one of the
You all are
reasons-
supposed to be the building, individual
We-
student.
We're many times criticized here at these board meetings for presenting such huge pictures of the
Yeah,
data.
but that's,
But if you recall, in past meetings, we have been asked to connect the dots.
yes.
Even tonight, that came up. And so what we try to do is put those reports together in a way that we're connecting the dots.
Yep.
A Read 180 report by itself is not good until you see what other pieces we've looked at in the way of math
Makes
or
perfect
SAT scores, or I'm not sure what it is, maybe attendance, discipline. We try to package that so that you see how we're trying to build a system of analysis rather than silos of tests. So
But at
that's
the
why
same
we
time,
haven't done that.
You're using that test to determine the reading level. That's the primary test that's being used to
That's
determine
right.
the reading level.
That's right.
Our goal is reading.
The paradox of this whole conversation is that because we are so public and transparent about everything we do, and it's on the press, it's on the television, the hysteria that surrounds, oh my gosh, only 65% of those kids could read at grade level. I don't want to throw that out because Brian will probably print the 65%.
That was a made-up number.
It's a made-up number, Brian. But I think we have a real balancing act here. Our role as supporters of Richmond Community Schools as a public school system and the need for making sure that this information is clear. I mean, I think we have to be a little careful that we
I would agree
don't
with that, too.
throw things out and we create hysteria and we create a
one
bad
bit of
image
data.
where there isn't a bad image around one piece. So how we can do what you just said, Dixie, we get the data, we don't discuss it until the analysis comes in, then that gives us the lead time to actually read the data when we want to do it. It's the public discussion of silos of data that get us into
I
trouble
agree
with
with
the
that.
public.
Yep,
And
I
that
agree
I
with
get a little worried about.
I don't think it should be discussed, but at least you see the data, you kind of see where the problems are. Then when you come with the solutions,
Right.
then it
we
kind of
can
makes you
have the
happy.
discussion.
That way you have your questions, Jeff,
Right.
and then you can
Yeah,
say,
I
oh yeah, they answered my question.
Well, I really
about that
wouldn't
bit."
call reading a silo of information, and one of the things in working with Dr. Benjamin and giving us lots of information to read, he indicated in one of the articles that I read that we should all be well aware of what our reading levels are of our students. I mean, for heaven's sakes, how can we help them if we don't know where the problems are? And so, and you know, I just read a little article about school boards, and it said that there is a law that all school boards should follow, and that's the law of responsibility. And basically, school boards are responsible for everything. It doesn't mean that we are on a day-to-day basis, that we are in there making those day-to-day decisions, but we're the big decision maker here. And so I say congratulations to all of us for being so concerned about our students.
No, we don't disagree about that, but we definitely don't need to, I don't think, be talking and discussing about one piece of data in a vacuum. Before,
that's
you know,
the
that
issue.
I think would be, that's the danger.
That's really dangerous.
That's the danger of our where our public perception or
Absolutely.
positive or negative lies, is when we talk about those specific silos, when we're not ready to really discuss everything, the entire data, what has been accumulated, how it falls in line with the strategies, what new strategies have got to be put in place in order for us to do that. Because those that do hear out there, whether it be with pen or with their ears, they'll only hear that one little bit of snippet. And then to paraphrase Jeff, that's where chaos lies, where there may not be chaos, something that is explainable. But it's better explainable when the answer is more ready to be answered, when the question is more ready to be answered, than just to have the ad hoc discussions without the ability to have the most informed answer.
Thank you. Good discussion. Did you have anything else you wanted to add to that?
No, no,
Okay.
not at all.
We will move on to the summer school report.
Mr. Millis.
Mr. Nashfield, thank you. This is actually a continuation of an earlier report, and part of that is because we did not have some information and data earlier in the fall. So I have done that. So the first slide is our programming. Our programming was very similar to where we've been in the past, with the exception of Third Grade Academy, focused primarily on the iRead test, majority of those students. So if you go to the next slide, thank you. We did continue our theme-based courses in our RCS programming. There were 10 of those. We did move the date back to the June-July time frame to allow for the retesting of Third Grade Academy students. So in order to have everybody on the same page, we did so. Go back to the other slide, a couple things. In the high school level, I would point out our addition of the online coursework, not only for credit recovery, but also expanded for students to be able to earn credits. Many students earn credits within a week or two at their time frame, so that worked out very well for us. Thank you. Go to the next one. Our attendance was off a little bit. I would point out we had more students enrolled this summer, so with more students, it was a little more challenging to get them all there, but I think still having 88%, that's pretty good. The Third Grade Academy is posted there about the same on their attendance. In the high school, this one's a little difficult to report because, as I mentioned with the online courses, students are there when they've completed the course and they're done with their attendance. So we reported on the traditional classes and then gave 100% to the kids that completed their courses. We earned 229 credits at the high school. Last summer we had, in 2011, 256 credits. That's down a little bit, but at the same time, we offered probably fewer courses and So the efficiency rate was probably higher. Go to the next frame. $170,000 approximately was spent on summer instruction this year, and we were concerned that we would not be reimbursed for maybe a third of that, but it ended up that the Department of Education did reimburse us 105% for the first grade through third grade reading programs, and 100% for the fourth through sixth, and also the high school programs. So basically, we covered our cost and also covered the costs that were necessary for the third grade academy. The data, we utilized our acuity data this year and M-class dibbles, and when we receive that back, we receive green for pass or at benchmark, red is below benchmark, or yellow is below benchmark, red is well below. And so we took the same students from summer school, looked at their performance in the spring and then also this fall. I think one of our major goals really is for students to maintain. And in that regard, I really believe this past summer we were very successful, and our students, 63%, maintained, meaning they had at least the same score they did in the spring. We looked at two different ways. One was, did they maintain? And then the other way was, did they score at benchmark? Which, you know, that's where they're at based on Acuity A. The K-2 had the highest number as far as maintaining, but the fourth grade actually had the highest percentage of students that increased or maintained. Move on.
Let me ask a quick question.
Sure.
I was confused. When you're talking about fourth grade, were those rising fourth graders? How are kids placed? Are they placed in the grade they were in the year before or as rising fourth graders? That just makes a difference.
The year before, because just think of the third grade.
That's just a continuation of the third grade.
Yes,
Okay.
we had to follow that this year, especially because of the funding mechanism. They funded 1 through 3 100%. At least that's what they said initially. So, first blush, we did not think we were going to be able to cover kindergarten, even though we included kindergarten students. But because we received 105%, ended up we were able to do that. So, yes, it'd be what grade level they were at in the previous year. Just implications, based on the data and how we feel students did, we feel like it was a positive all the way across the board in terms of the high school students earning credits. Our middle school students, don't want to forget to mention that we have a grade level that works with the Earlham MAT program, and also then our K-6 and third grade students. So we would want to continue, if we follow the same calendar, which I think will be pretty close to that we would offer about the same coursework, the same time frame for this upcoming summer. We think they will reimburse about the same rate. There just seems to be a strong history. We received signals this year that we might not, but it ended up that maybe not as many school systems had remedial coursework that we anticipated for third grade students. So we just feel that we'll go forward with the same plans and look to work a little stronger with the third grade academy, and working with the data that we receive from iRead 3 and our own data, so that we can the numbers, I brought those from third grade. Just we had a report earlier, but again we had a handful of students that did not pass, and were retained. I believe that was 13, and we want to minimize that as much as possible. So.
Can I ask a question back on those results? Out of the 275, it said 75 had a slight to larger decrease. What do you, that's in K through 6, right?
Right.
What do you attribute that to? It
Hard to
just doesn't make
pinpoint,
sense,
except
does
they
it?
just did not maintain their performance the next fall. One of the funny things, we used to do Northwest evaluation in the school system. I believe Richmond schools did it too, and it was reflective of summer loss. And so, it just, without the intensity, probably occurs during the school year. Some students just do not maintain and
Could be the
grow.
attendance.
Pat, did you have a question?
We got 2 calendars, and you mentioned the calendar. Every year we get the report that says for a number of students, and I would bet that this is just the tip of the iceberg for a number of students. What is the implications, and how do we look at this implication when we're looking at the calendar? And I know money is an issue, but educationally, everybody says there's summer loss, and our report shows that with some intention we can minimize or at least help kids maintain. How do we, I guess maybe this is not a rhetorical question, how do we take these implications, this is the data that we have gathered here, and help us formulate a calendar that really works to support students as they struggle with that summer? That probably isn't a question you can answer right now, but I think we really have to wrestle with that. We know that, and our data show it every year that kids lose. So what do we need to do about that, other than petition for more money from the state? I understand all that.
Well,
but I mean, how
Dr.
can we...
Borf and I actually had that conversation to some degree this morning, because when you talk about a balanced calendar versus a year-round calendar, those are two different things.
Sure.
And many of the balanced calendars still have 6 to 7 weeks, maybe more, time off. So the research
In a
would
row?
indicate.
Yeah, in the summer, in that big summer chunk.
The research would indicate that
Still too
loss would be similar to the current. So the way we
That
do
doesn't
it.
really help.
No,
Right.
you really would have to run more of a year-round calendar to minimize those breaks.
Linda?
A couple things. First of all, I noticed that the third grade academy attendance was 93%. Ours was 88.5%, I think. So what do you think is the difference there? I mean,
Good
they're all our kids.
Good
Well,
shepherds.
that's what I was wondering, if we have instituted Good Shepherds. We've talked about it for 2 or 3 years. So are we going to become believers in that really does work, or?
These data show it.
Well, and
Well, I
yet,
think the third grade
Shows
academy, they
attendance,
have
but I'm not
fewer
sure.
students, and they have smaller class size, so they can target certain persons to certain students. Doesn't mean we can't duplicate that ourselves. But last year, our attendance actually, we had a higher percentage than third grade academy, so I don't know if that piece of information is indicative of
But the strong
difficulty in getting
The
kids.
strong shepherd volunteers are pretty instrumental in that too, because I talk to a lot of the shepherds who do. I mean, they really pay attention to those kids, not just in the class. They go get them and do.
and yet our 4th grade really did better than the 3rd grade academy. I mean, as far as results wise.
Yeah.
So.
Aaron?
I have 2 questions.
Okay, I'm sorry.
You go ahead, Aaron,
No,
and
you
then
go ahead.
I'll
Go ahead.
come back
Go
and
ahead.
ask my question.
All right, well,
Yeah.
going back to the attendance, the K through 6, is there a cost per family for the student to go to to summer school in K through 6? It's not, okay. This year we were at 88.5, down from 92% last year. And my concern is, again, the retention of what they may have had in the spring. You used the word maintain, but retaining what they had in the spring throughout the summer and making sure that they're class ready in the fall. Well, my question would be, is there any way that we can offer an incentive to those parents to make sure, for those 6 weeks or whatever, that please ensure that your son or daughter, K through 6, is going to be in class every day because this is important for them. And in partnering with you, if, I'm just throwing this out, if you can ensure that your son or daughter, and we're going to give them the very best resources that we can to make sure that by the time they get to school next year, that they're not going to be a step behind, but they're going to be, on par or a step ahead of where they were, that maybe we can come up with some type of incentive to give back to them so the mother and father and parents know that, hey, we're putting money into your child. We want you to help us do that, and if you can be our partner with this, we will give something back to you. It's just a thought.
Yeah.
I don't like 80.
I will say that
Parental visit.
the principals felt like the previous summer, when we started summer school a little bit later, where we actually had a 3-week break and then started it later, that helped with that because the kids had a break.
And
They were through all their
Right.
camps.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, it became complicated to have classes again at Boys and Girls Club, but we did provide transportation in the morning and also accommodated students after school was out. So we had a lot of kids still going there. So I think there were some things in the previous year that helped us with the attendance, the timing of it, and I think we'll still be, if the test is still about the same time, we'll probably.
And we did have a larger number of students. We had 76 more students, right? So that could account for a small percentage.
Sure we do, but again, I get concerned with that 88.5 down from 92%, because again, that small segment of students, by the time that they enter our classrooms again in August, if they missed, let's say 75% of their classes or their class time that summer, it's basically just been a wash at best. And my thought would be, let's make sure that we keep them in there, of
Well,
course.
it's habit forming, too.
Well, I think you need to keep in mind that some families sign up for summer school knowing ahead of time they're going to miss, and they're still encouraged to bring their children to summer school. They've got a family vacation scheduled, and they say, I'm not going to be there that 1 week, and teachers will say, well, come when,
Still rather have you.
Yeah.
important to have you there for the, part of the time rather than none, so.
Well,
I try to make individual decisions with students when we know they're going to be out for a planned vacation, and we don't want them out too much because then it becomes a challenge really to accomplish anything. But if they're willing to be there most of the time, then we try to work with them. I think in the old days, if you missed 2 or 3 days, then you couldn't come back to summer school, and we don't gain anything by doing that as far as their performance. So.
Well, how long's it been since we have got summer school funded 100%?
Last 2 years.
Last 2 years.
Really?
Linda?
Well, I was just wondering, do you set benchmarks for summer school so that those expectations are relayed to the parents? Because you said that 63% maintained, and you thought that was pretty good. What makes you think that's pretty good? I mean, did you set a benchmark as far as what you would hope that the percentage would maintain? Or is
I
it just?
think we're hopeful that a majority of students will maintain their learning that they had when they left school. To putting a number on it, no, we really have not done that. Now we have a little more information, and that's if we continue in the future using Acuity, and we'll have Park in a couple of years. So, but we felt like we had history with Acuity now, and we could kind of track that. With the C performance to the A performance, and
Well, do you feel that by setting expectations so that everybody knows what those expectations are, I'm kind of into expectations, so that the parents know,
Well, that's a good idea, because really, they view, in some cases, this will sound a little bad, but they view it kind of as something for the kids to do during the summer versus the learning part of it.
Well, I think that's the way it was back in the day. We went to summer school.
well, and structure
fun.
is good for kids.
Right.
Whether it's going to JUCO or, that can still be a learning situation, but I think
We
creating
do
those
have letters,
expectations.
Linda, and we also try to have teachers contact the families and talk to them before summer school starts. So there are some expectations laid out.
Okay. I'm going to move on. We have a pretty heavy agenda tonight to state A through F grades.
Dr. Parker has that information for us tonight.
Okay, those letter grades, the final version, were included in your board packet. We've had these grades for a while, and as Member Slifer said, those were sent in the September 21st board update, and then those were preliminary, and we had a period of time where we could appeal. We did submit an appeal for one school. It ended in a few changes, but it didn't ultimately change the letter grade. So as a district, Richmond Community Schools earned an overall grade of C. And we had schools ranging from letter grade of A, and we did have all the way the gamut to an F school. And so our schools that didn't score where we wanted, we've already met with. They've begun working on the IDOE-approved improvement plan template. It's a turnaround model from Mass Insight, and it requires us to look at our data very carefully and set priority areas of improvement. The first phase of that is to do a root cause analysis, and those will be submitted to the DOE by December 1st. And then after that, we'll be looking at a review of research and evidence-based interventions that the IDOE will approve. And once that happens, then we'll have an implementation timeline. So it's a three-phase process to get the improvement plans approved. So as far as grades go, there were some high points. Obviously, we've gotten a lot of excitement from Dennis Middle School, now Dennis Intermediate School, moving from an F to an A. And that was a concerted effort on the part of everyone in that school, including parents and students. The teachers were incredible. Leadership was incredible. Something to really be proud of. But some other things to note. Number one, at the high school, we were 0.05 of a point away from a B, which was an incredible improvement as well. And one of the things that we can celebrate about Richmond High School is they earned full credit, the full 4 points for the college and career readiness, meaning that a large percentage of our students leave with college credits or secondary certificates. So those students fare very well there. As you'll recall, this is the first year that we've used this new model for calculating grades. In the past, we always knew what our target was because we knew where we needed to be in terms of proficiency for all of our subgroups in order to make a certain grade, and we knew what score we needed to get for Safe Harbor. So we had a set target to shoot for. And at this point in time, we have that with the performance piece. We know that in order to get an A, we have to be at the 90%. We have to be at 85%, 80% to earn full credit there. The fly in the ointment now is the growth model and the improvement data. So I think Brian quoted me in the paper when he called and talked to me about the grades as saying it's a little hard to know what we're shooting for. And so I've prepared a couple slides that I pulled directly from our student data to kind of give you an idea of what we're dealing with. This is a sample of kids in our 5th grade data pool. So you look at student A, who lost 146 points from last year to this year, scored really, really well last year, scored in a pass range this year, lost 146 points, but because of the pool that student was in, that student was rated as showing typical growth, and so that counted as a typical growth student. Then we have down here a student who had a 551 last year and a 559 this year, who in 1 year's time increased his scale score by 5 points, and or 6 points, and that's typical growth, or 8 points, and that's high growth. As educators, we're not excited that a student only grew 8 scaled score points from 1 year to the next. That's not a win for us. But based on the model that the DOE has given us, that's a high growth, and we get, a pat on the back for that. So the reason I'm showing you this is to say it really is an unknown. It's a shot in the dark. We have no idea who is in this student's cohort. We have no idea what sort of educational experience they're getting, and we have no idea how many are in there, and we have no idea what their overall scores were. So this is a sample from our 5th grade data. And then this is a sample from our 7th grade data, and I've highlighted a couple at the top. If you look at student 2 and student 3, we have 2 students there that were really pretty similar last year. One had a score of 672 and one had a score of 676. And then this year, one had a score of 597, dropped 79 points. That's typical growth. And one student dropped 67 points, and that's high growth. Now, how would a teacher or a principal or a school system know what that we're shooting for? Is, again, we look at those two and say, that's not a win for us. We're not happy about that. We want students to grow. Based on this data, the student didn't grow, but the DOE, based on their growth model, says one grew in a typical range, one made really high growth. So this is what data that we're dealing with, and so it makes it really hard for a school to know. What the schools are doing right now, they're taking all their students, for instance, at the elementary schools, the only students for whom they will have growth model data this year are their 4th grade students. They'll have last year's 3rd grade scores, this year's 4th grade scores. They're taking all those students' 3rd grade scores, they're rank ordering them and saying, this is our bottom 25%, this is our top 75%, this is our whole student body. In order to get those extra points, 42.4% of the bottom 25% have to make high growth, and no fewer than 39-point-something% of the whole group can make low growth. Well, we know how we define low growth and high growth, but this growth model data makes it impossible for us to know how that's going to be defined. And we don't know that ahead of time. We don't know until the test is taken and all the kids that are in that cohort are put in there and the numbers come back out. So just wanted to share this with you. The second example would be those students who were in the 650s. Both lost 47 points. One had typical growth, one had high growth. And it just is the nature of the cohort group that you're with.
Do they stay in the same cohort group?
No, their cohort group changes every year. So for a 3rd grade student, our 4th graders this year, they are already in a cohort group with anyone who had the same score as them last year in the state of Indiana. So if I scored a 400 in English Language Arts as a 3rd grader, my cohort group is with everyone else in the state of Indiana who scored a 400 on English Language Arts. That's my cohort group. Now, it gets a little bit, you'll see that the numbers get a little crazier as kids get older because they're doing this 3-year look back at data. So if I'm a 7th grader, my cohort group consists of the people who earned the same score as me in 6th grade, the same score as me in 5th grade, and the same score as me in 4th grade.
Right.
So we've automatically said that's a pretty small cohort. So I worry about sample size. I have no idea how many kids are in that student's cohort. It could be 100, could be 10. I don't know. The fewer students we have in the cohort group, the greater that standard error measure gets. And the range of scores is very, very small, too. So you get put in a new cohort group. As soon as you take that test and you get a new score, you're moved into a new cohort group. So,
Cumulative score cohort.
and this would just be a look at our 8th grade students. And so you see a student lost 2 points, and he's got high growth. A student lost 9 points, it's low growth. A student gains 26 points. It's low growth, gains 28 points, it's high growth, 31 points, it's low growth. I'm just going to say I don't think it's the best model.
Wow.
So,
Well, we had all of our elementary schools at A level last year. This year, they're all over the place. And people come up and ask you, and it's impossible to explain that.
Right.
And if you can't explain what you're doing, why in the world are we doing it? It's just wrong.
And
Well, what
we
it tells you-
being the state of Indiana.
Yes.
What it tells you
Yes.
is, we can't worry about it. We just have to worry about doing our job locally.
Student by student by student.
Uh, What we have to do is continue to do is what we've always done. Take
Right.
students where they are, give them the resources that we can give them, and move them as far as we can move them.
Yep.
All we can do.
Thank you.
Wow. And the sad thing about that, even with that explanation, people will still look at that in a judgmental manner and not realize that there's no rhyme or reason to it. So,
Well, no, but you know what? Presentations like that and a YouTube video on the webpage or Palladium Items webpage or
Be helpful.
stuff like that
Yeah.
would help explain
Yeah.
it, would help get that
I think
word
the
out.
YouTube video would be an excellent
I
idea.
mean, the
Well,
Palladium
it
has
was
all
just
kinds of-
recorded. Isn't it just recorded?
Yes.
you know, and the worst thing about it is
Right.
all the hard effort that was given by teachers and administrators in respective buildings throughout the corporation, you know, suffer from that. And
It doesn't
a lot
show.
of times it does not show the above and beyond the Call of Duty effort that they were given, and still they get those type of those grades.
Well, and we're
We're going
really
to grade our
pushing.
teachers on this, too.
Exactly. And we're pushing our kids to own their data, so we need
Well,
to be sure we
and-
don't include any of that because that'll just confuse them. You got
The kids
26
who
plus.
do own their data and are looking at it, for instance, we had a principal say, my student was a pass plus last year, a pass plus this year, made good growth. Counts against me, low growth. And so students want to know, what's my growth?
Okay, let's move on to the 2013-2014 school calendar.
We've had two calendars put before you tonight at your places.
These are just drafts.
These are just drafts, and Mrs. Stewart can tell you more about some of the conversation around both of them. Calendar A is a traditional calendar, very much like the one that we have this year. Calendar B is more of a balanced year calendar. And the third calendar that we brought to you last year, we didn't even put together because we don't anticipate that it would be a calendar that this community is ready for. But it truly would address the issue that was discussed earlier, and that would be how do you minimize time out of school to prevent the learning loss that we see happen during the summer. And that would be a year-round calendar. Last year I presented that. It was a 4-day week.
Right.
Spread out through the year with about the longest being a 3-week time period off. And that would probably be during the summer. To be very honest, the balanced year calendar, which looks very much like a traditional calendar with some longer breaks therein, you would have a week fall break in October. You'd have 3 days for Thanksgiving break. You'd have 2 weeks at spring break, but you still have a long summer.
Yeah.
That calendar is nice for employees, but we've heard from parents that this complicates the child care issue.
Yes, it does.
When you look at these extended breaks during the year, does not minimize that summer loss. In fact, there are some teachers who will tell us that when the students are off for 2 weeks, there's a time for review back when they return back to school.
1 week even.
I have discussed these calendars or the concepts with Dr. Edsall over at Northeastern because they share so many of our programs, and we try to align ourselves with them. They feel the same way, that for what you get from a balanced year calendar, from how little you get in terms of minimizing learning loss, they would rather proceed with a traditional calendar. I'm not so sure that we don't follow that same sentiment. What I have not been able to do yet is to get a feel from some of the area schools besides Northeastern, whether they're looking at going with a balanced calendar or a traditional. Nettle Creek does go with the balanced calendar because they're more aligned with Newcastle. Centerville, Western Wayne have pretty much an alignment with Connorsville, and I don't know yet what Connersville is doing. Last year, they looked at the balanced calendar, but there was a real conflict with the state fair and all the student obligations during the state fair, and they kind of backed away from that. So if the whole area were to go to a balanced year calendar, we do need to seriously consider that, because we do share programs, we do share athletic schedules, we share a number of programs. So we'd have to consider that. Right now, I'm not sure where they stand. We would like to make our recommendation next month, no later than next month, so we'll be researching some of that.
Wouldn't the year-round, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Wouldn't the year-round schedule cause a little bit of issue with as much of the dual credit that we have too with the higher education there?
Well, the chancellors from IU East and from Ivy Tech met with us this week and said that while they can work with it, they just like to know where we stand, because dual credit is an issue, even with the trimester.
Well, I know it is even now,
Yeah.
but that would even, I would think, make it
They're
more
concerned
complicated.
about that.
Well, I just think right now, when we have the free and reduced lunch as high as it is here in Richmond, that a balanced calendar would create undue hardship on our parents right now.
Without really helping our results.
Yes, and without much, I think we have to take time to get our parents ready for this. And, you can't just spring it on them.
Suzanne?
Is there evidence, is there research to support the balanced calendar?
Well, I'm not so sure that the evidence, even that they have right now, would be worth a whole lot, because the balanced calendars haven't been in existence that long.
Long enough.
So we don't know over time what those results are.
Jeff?
She asked a question about the research, but several years ago at the school board conferences, they were really pushing their year-round schedule.
Yeah.
They had a lot of research that talked about 3 weeks between grading periods. 2 of those weeks, every student has off, and then they use 1 week completely dedicated to remediation or bringing students up to. And they had lots of research to support that. There's no research at the conferences on the balances. So.
Right.
Aaron?
Well, something that I just read within the last few months, going back to what was said in regards to child care, as well as, I never even thought about the cost of meals or those who in free and reduced lunch situations. But something that I just read recently basically is saying that is moving away from a balanced calendar in a lot of areas when you have a predominantly urban style school corporation, which, let's face it, we are, as opposed to something that may be more rural or something more in a unique situation, as other school corporations are, with less free and reduced lunch needs. It can work there, as opposed to those, lack of better expression, inner city school corporations that families are dependent upon the services, in the traditional manner. So
The question that I raised, when I went to the presentation that Jeff heard, those 2 weeks were filled with very innovative, creative programs through community partners. And when I looked at a balanced calendar, I look at the budgets of the Boys and Girls Club and the Girls Inc. and those places, because they're struggling to find resources to do that as well. So we can't just do this on our own. It's not just parents, it really is the community partners who would have to be at the table talking about what they could offer or what they would need.
Well, and the lunch program is kind of critical right now.
Yep. And breakfast. Linda?
Well, I was just wondering what Elisa's committee, you have several teachers on that
I do.
committee, and I was just wanting to hear their thinking.
Okay. Let me first acknowledge the people on the committee. Penny Shank, Mindy Jackson Wampler, Rhonda Reinhart, and Glenn Reed are teachers on the committee. Tammy Rhodes, Nicole Vandevort, Jeff Thorne, our administrators on the committee, and Vicki Fisher. It works in the Human Resources Office, and she's our scribe and redoes the calendars. And just a shout out of thank you to Vicki. I think we've had 9 or 10 different versions to this point. We talked about looking at the calendar a little bit differently in terms of, do we want to have fall break in October or have an extended Thanksgiving week off? We talked about that 2 weeks at Christmas time. On one of the calendars, we looked at a 2-week spring break also. That sounds nice, but I got some feedback today after the committee members looked at it. Well, we have ISEP after that 2-week break in the spring, so probably not the best idea. Pardon? Thank you. So, teachers have been wonderful about getting this information out. I told them that it was the most widely shared calendar we've had on the committee for a long time. So, but we did talk about a balanced calendar. We even looked at a calendar that began July 19th. And we put that one aside pretty quickly. Well, because while we know what the research says about student achievement, and we just had a conversation about, boy, we need to look at this, the political realities are what they are. And so we put that one aside pretty quickly. It's really difficult to be too creative with 186 days for teachers and 180 for students. I mean, you can only do so much. But we did look at those changes and the breaks, and then we looked at 4 snow days on one of them, using Martin Luther King and President's Day as snow makeup if needed, and then 2 others. And then on another calendar, we looked at 4 snow days, and we've talked about adding the snow days at the end. So we've had quite spirited conversation. But again, these are drafts, and we will work hard to bring back another.
Thank you. Wasn't part of the not having days added at the end was so that the high school would have time for the online classes?
Right.
For students.
They can do that. That and the fact that typically the snow days happen during the second trimester, and then we'd be adding days to the third trimester.
Doesn't matter.
So we're still working.
And Dr. Work?
I think that the utilization of those 2 holidays is a pretty good idea. I know we've sort of avoided that over the years, but it's been done in most of the other districts in our neighborhood. And while I understand when you have to use them, I know I hear about it when we don't, when we have all those snow days built in and then we don't use them and we have that extra holiday and everyone's like, why are we off school? We need to be in school. So I think that's pretty smart. It's my opinion.
On to action items.
The first action item would be to move policies 3421, 2104, 2105, and 2110 to a second reading and adoption. Maybe you want to entertain a motion before we have discussion on that?
Do I hear a motion to accept the first readings of Policy 3421, Benefits for Administrators, Policy 2104, Board Vision, Policy 2105, Mission of the Corporation, and Policy 2110, Statement of Beliefs? Aaron Stevens makes the motion, and Dixie Robinson seconds the motion. Comments and questions?
Let
You
me,
spent from 7 to 7:30 talking about that, I think.
well, that's true. The 3 of those policies reflect the recent board work to revise the strategic plan and articulate vision and mission as well as leadership values. The first one, though, Benefits for Administrators, is simply to clean up something that should have been done a few years ago. It just didn't come into need. A few years ago, insurance benefits were reduced for all administrators. to fall in line with the same support given to the teachers. What we failed to do was to correct some of the policy language for that, so that if teachers were to move into administration, they wouldn't receive a reduction in those benefits. We didn't foresee that. Such a situation has happened this year. That was unintended. This language clears that up so that it just doesn't happen in the future. The administrators receive the same board support that the teachers would receive, and that enhances the likelihood that we will have teachers who feel good about making that move into administration should the time come.
Any comments or questions? Okay. I have the motion on the floor, so all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? On to administrative non-certified compensation plan.
Yes. For some time, we've talked about addressing compensation needs of the non-teaching staff. And what we've tried doing, we have tried connecting the administrator's package with the teachers, in the sense that there is a compensation plan that the state requires for the teachers, also for the administrators, and the administrative compensation model, which we've discussed at different points, will be recognizing student achievement, but for right now, it recognizes leadership and attendance, and that's in sync with what we've done with the teachers. Next year, this compensation model will look a little different, but for this year, this is how we've done it. With the rest of the staff, we have not built our compensation model so much on that same plan, but we have recognized that the classified staff has not had wage increases for some time, and we felt like recognizing their commitment to the corporation was just as important as the leadership piece in administration and teachers. And for that reason, classified staff over $20,000 annual salary would receive a 1% stipend. Those under $20,000 in salary would receive a straight $200 stipend. For some, that would be more than a 1%. But we felt that was where we needed to be. With highly qualified paraprofessionals and preschool instructors, however, we looked at that a little differently. We've talked in the past that we need to adjust the compensation, the salary of these individuals, particularly the paraprofessionals. The paraprofessionals are there to support our teachers. This year alone, from August to today, we've had 18 turnovers in our paraprofessionals, 18 of those. We also know that 3 of the 4 county schools outside of Richmond are already paying in the $10 category, $10 range for paraprofessionals. So what we're recommending is that the paraprofessionals receive a $2 per hour wage increase, which bumps that up to $10.37. The preschool instructors, we're recommending a $1.07 hourly increase, which brings that to, Mrs. Stewart,
11 something.
56.
11:57.
11:57. Now that comes with a sizable commitment from our general fund that goes into recurring mode, and that is $200,000. The rest of that would be a one-time expense coming from our surplus in the general fund for this year. The $200,000 would be ongoing, and it would be a part of our operational plan to address a balanced budget for next year, and we are prepared to share the details of how we might take care of that for next year as well. But that is the recommendation that I'm making to the board tonight.
Kelly, could I ask, are we voting on this all on one, or could we request that we vote on the stipends, which would A, B, and C, and then vote on the other two?
The recommendation is all one, but how you want to vote on that is up to the board.
I think I would like to see it broke out, I think. I would like to see, I don't know whether we need to go to every individual category, but I would like to see.
Well, A, B, and C are all covering stipends.
Correct.
And then D and E are covering otherwise, so
And that's a good
that's why
separation.
I
That's
was
this year's money
thinking
and next
that.
year's money, so.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to accept the recommendation for administrators, contracted classified staff over $20,000, and classified staff under $20,000?
So moved.
Linda Morgeson makes the motion. Dixie Robinson seconds the motion. Comments and questions on this? All those in favor, please signify by saying
I have
aye.
a comment or question.
Aye.
Or-
Wait,
Are
Jeff.
we're just voting on A through C now.
Right, the
Okay.
stipends.
My question was clarity, so,
Okay.
thank you.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? A, B, and C are passed. Those are the stipends for administrators, contracted classified staff over 20,000, and classified staff under 20,000. Do I have a recommendation on D and E, which is highly qualified professionals with a $2 per hour salary raise, and preschool instructors with a $1.07 per hour salary raise?
So moved.
Second.
Pat Heine makes the motion, and Suzanne Darengowski seconds the motion. Are there comments and questions on this? Jeff?
I guess my first question is, Dr. Borf had offered some explanation on how
Details.
we're going to pay for it, some details, and before you start with your explanation, I'm kind of hoping that we align it with the information that we received and the board. I guess it was the board update Friday night.
Right.
As far as I'm assuming that we're working off of those same numbers.
These are, if I could speak to that. Last year, we had 20 retirements and 9 resignations. We replaced X amount of those people, but of those 20 retirements, the average cost, salary and benefits for each one of those was $79,000. That's actual, right? Show you the numbers. Then the ones we replaced from retirements and or resignations, the average replacement cost for each one of those teachers was $48,000. So for each person in and out, we saved last year $31,000 per person. Using that into effect, not saying we're going to have 20 retirements and 9 resignations, I factored in no resignations and 15 retirements. If you have 15 retirements and you replace each one of them with a $31,000 savings for a new person, and that's not all beginning level people, that's just where it landed last year, that's a net savings of $465,000. I think that showing that we can afford this, we can do what's right for our students in helping the continuity of their education by not having the turnover, and pay for it not on the backs of reduction in force or touching a classroom teacher.
Now, if I don't want to go out
Go
of
ahead.
turn, but kind of
Go
a
ahead.
question on. I guess I'm just trying to first clarify the numbers that we're working with, because our sheet shows 400,000 for 2013 for general, is that what you're calling general fund cuts and adjustments?
Yes.
So now that's 465 versus the 400,000.
Well, that means if we miss it by 65,000, we've still gotten the 400,000.
So you're budgeting $400,000.
Yes.
Okay. Now, I was trying to determine, looking at our last cash flow, our anticipated receipts for the end of this year is at 36.8 basically million, and we're showing a end of cash year balance. Now, this is the last cash flow statement you gave us of $243,000. Now, is that $243,000 inclusive of the 1% stipend that we've
Yes.
already? So the one for the teachers is already taken out of that pool.
That's correct.
So we have $243,000 left. Now, so we're working on a deficit of next year of $670,000 is what you're projecting,
Plus
plus 2 for.
200,000 more if this
Well,
goes.
right. I'm just trying to get to the same numbers that.
Correct.
'Cause I couldn't get to the numbers that you got to. So if we're at 669,000 and we're going to add another $200,000 to that, so we're looking at 869. Okay, now that's where you used your 400. And out of the 243 that we have balanced this year, we're going to use might as well say $100,000 for what we've already approved tonight. So that leaves us a positive balance of $143,000.
Correct. But should this be approved, we would have 2 pays with highly qualified left in this year, so they would realize something, and that's where you get the other.
The anticipated start date for this raise would be December 1st then.
Yes, the final the 2 pays in. It would basically be, it's probably starting Thursday, because we get paid, the new pay cycle starts Friday.
Okay.
And that way we could get them 2 full pays.
In December.
Okay, and then, so the question becomes then, is that the extent of the cuts that you have planned right now? I mean, is that the details, the extent of the details? Or? I guess I should say it this way.
I've got a list of potential cuts that Mrs. Morgeson and I had a lengthy conversation, a very good conversation this week that says, you know, if we are going to have $400,000 in general fund cuts, we will have $400,000 in general fund cuts. If we only have, now, we've already got 4 retirements for next year that's going to start in December, one in December, one in January, one in February, and another one we've got. So now we're only 11 off. So that's not too far off on this. But should we miss this number, there are other cuts, and none of them have to do, at this point in time, with reduction in force of classroom teachers. One of the cuts we're looking at is Kelly Services. Now, we don't get a dollar-for-dollar savings in that if we would have to go that way. I think they've done a nice job for us, because we would have to reload and do it ourselves, so you don't get a 40% savings on that, but that's been factored. There's been factored at looking at extracurricular. Some of the, I mean, I've got a lot of different areas that we have put straw men up. Should we, could we might, we look. None of those decisions have been made, but we're not going to bank on anything except preserve the classroom teacher.
But you're not, but the 15 retirements, you're not planning to replace any of those people?
No, I'm planning on replacing every one of them.
That's
at a
why
less cost
he's
saving.
$31,000 is the same.
Younger teachers.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay. Thank you, yeah.
Dixie, you had a question?
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question because I saw the student increase at 25 students, say. And so, and I guess I was struggling with planning a budget based on an assumption of increasing when that hasn't been a trend.
That's a good, we put a master plan together in December the 13th, 2011, that says we are going to put our better utilization of resources. We're going to have a logos program. We're going to have an early college program. We're going to do this with the thing of not just saving money, but attracting students. And one of the reasons we're asking for a possible rainy day fund, let us stabilize this organization for 2 to 3 years and see if our assumptions are right. Now, we didn't expect an increase in students last year with the ins and outs and the turmoil, but I hope that what we're doing are some good things. And if these good things materialize, we don't lose 25, 50, 75 students. We get them, we gain. This whole thing is banked that said we want the best and the brightest and the best that every parent has to think that this is the education of choice. We made those changes last year to believe that. I still believe that's possible.
Well, and I want that to happen, but I find it unrealistic to base your budget.
Okay. And as I said, we have the presentation in front of you on that and the thing that says we will balance that budget. By law, we have to balance the budget.
Right.
I wouldn't come to you and say, we'll do the 400,000 in cuts. We didn't get the 25, but do you see in 2013 how much revenue I've got for student increases? 0.
Well, but that's assuming we're going to stay even keel.
That's assuming that we're going to stay even keel, or that they pass that they take the money away from us in July, because again, we have to realize we don't have a budget for starting July 1st, 2013 to June 30th, 2015.
Well, and
the state of Indiana doesn't. So they haven't mandated that. They've mandated to take a February count. They haven't mandated what to do with the money.
So we don't know, we really don't know yet if that will still affect us in 2013.
That is correct.
Well, and I had one other thing about the rainy day fund, because sometimes it seems like we're trying to balance our general fund budget with the rainy day fund, which I know it's there for shortfalls, but we keep draining it and draining it. So what percentage now at, what is it, 3 million? What percentage is that of our general budget?
If we go with at the end of this year, you see, this is a 3-year plan.
Or will we have money to put back in it at the end of the year?
We will this year. We don't know where we'll be next year. But this 3-year plan says this is our plan. We're looking long term. Hey, we'll know in September. We'll know in that. Whoa, time out. We didn't get the 25. We lost 50. The state's reappropriation took another $1 million off. We're back at the drawing board. We're not asking for a 3-year commitment on this. We're asking for a 1-year commitment that says, let's see if what we're going to do, and we can maintain the good programs and the work that we did this summer and get some more students. If we don't, let's go back to the drawing board. We're not asking for a 3-year commitment. We're saying, but this was what it would look like if it worked for 3 years.
But do we have enough in there, or will we have enough in there that we're going to be safe? Because right now, the economic situations has been like a roller coaster. I mean, you don't.
And that's why we have between a 6 to 8 to 10%. We've been able to do this because we've had the cash reserves, the rainy day. My friends, it's raining. That's why we did the buildings, we had the closures, we pulled it up, and all we're asking for, my understanding, is a 1 year that says let us use $469,000 of the rainy day 1 year, so we don't have to start making the cuts in January, February, and March for next year on the hopes of what might happen.
Give the master plan an opportunity to work.
Yeah, give the plan a work. If it doesn't, we'll balance the budget in 2013 because that's what we do.
Well, your plan on that I received shows the rainy day use for 2013, 2014, and 2015. With our cash, and this is interesting, it's no longer called rainy day fund, it's called cash balance, but the cash balance would be left at 2.6, or the rainy day balance at the end of 2013. Because as I'm first off, I'm dead set against balancing the budget based on the rainy day fund. That's, to me, we shouldn't do that. And now I'm not saying that we shouldn't say it's there and be aware of it. But when we negotiated with other groups, we can't go into deficit financing, and to me, this is deficit financing. Then I go to our focus area 5 on our strategic plan, and it, ensures that RCS contains a balanced budget with no deficit spending. Well, I call this deficit spending. So, as I went through and I looked at, and don't get me wrong, I want this group to receive a raise. Don't get me wrong here. I just am not happy right now with the plan of how we're going to pay for it. So, when I define, I think as a board, we've not had a good discussion on what we call a cash balance or a rainy day fund balance, because we are starting to mix the two. There's no, when we have these conversations, rainy day fund doesn't even come up anymore. It's cash balance. So when I take a look at part of the discussions that we need to discuss as a board from the financial point of view, is if we're going to base our budget on almost 37 million, our general fund budget.
I think it's more like 30,
36,
going to 35. What is
well,
the cash
I was
flow?
actually looking at projected for the end of 2012 is let's just use 37 because it's easy.
Yeah, we lose, it's 35 because we're losing $1 million on the 36. That's, we know, starting in January.
Well, the point I'm going to make is 35, 37, whichever, it doesn't matter. If I use the end of the projected balance for 2012 at 36,809, 1 month's cash flow is 3.067.
Sorry.
That's 8.3%. 2 months would be 6 million, or just a hair over 6 million. So I don't know, as a group, have we discussed what we're comfortable with on that level to be? Clearly, by using this, we're going to be at 2.6.
Which is about 7% cash balance.
Which makes me uncomfortable. Because now we're less than 1 month's cash flow. I guess that's how I'm looking at it.
And when would you use that
Well,
7%? If we're not going to use it on this, when would we?
Well, where I would use it is the unknowns. We have an ADM count date in February. Let's say
Another recession?
let's say our count is down 25 students and the state decides that they want to withhold another $200,000. I mean, to me, the rainy day fund is kind of like a savings account that we got to have this level to maintain. And when I see this cash balance plan, we're using the plan I have in front of me says that we're going to use the rainy day plan for the next 3 years. And then project, now I realize 2015 we're projected out, but that's what we have to do.
Sure.
If nothing goes wrong, we lose no students, and we gain 25 students in the year 2015, where our balance is only going to be at 2.1. That's half of it, that's a 2-week cash flow. So, that what I was trying to figure out is backing down to the cash that we got projected at the end of the year. I finished my number at 143, and then you reminded me of the 2 pays for another 23,000, so our cash is at 123. I would rather do some kind of a calculation out and use the cash that we have on hand and give these people that we want to reward and make them competitive, give them a bigger stipend or give them a bigger piece of the pie. But I guess I'm a little uncomfortable. I don't see the financial plan here and well enough for me to support a $200,000 reoccurring cost next year, and the year after, and the year after, because that would snowball for the next. That's 600,000. Well, it wouldn't be 600,000, but you know what I mean.
Point well taken.
Well, and we also have to be prepared too, the federal government, if they decide to make cuts, you know, at what, I think they were talking 8.2% of educational programs or what have you, at a time when our kids need more services, we need more technology to keep up, you know, all these things are just kind of snowballing and colliding. So
Linda?
that's why I was worried about the rainy
Well,
day fund.
And, I mean, these people, they do need
Yes.
compensation. I mean, obviously, I mean, they do need it. They are valuable to our organization in so many ways. And with that said, I have to also, you know, there's two things here of giving deserving people compensation that they deserve. But then there's another thing with the budget being, we're already, we don't have enough money. So my concern is that, okay, so we say we have enough money for 2013, but 2014, we're not sure whether we're going to have enough money to fund this $200,000 recurring cost. It has already been stated that we might have to have budget reductions. Well, I would certainly hate to give them this nice raise and then in a year say, oh, I'm sorry, but, you know, we're going to have to reduce the number of paras, or we're going to have to do something with our preschool teachers, and they wouldn't have a job. And the other thing is, you know, I'm like, I'm not sure that we should be balancing our budget with cash. You know, if I have a savings account and I want to balance my checkbook, I can take it out of my savings account to do that. But if I'm not putting money back in, pretty soon my savings account's going to be gone. And so, you know, I'm concerned about doing the responsible, prudent decision for our corporation. And I don't think I have enough facts and figures of how we're going to make this all happen down the road. And I'm very concerned. And we do. We have to balance the budget. We don't have a choice. The law says we have to balance the budget. So that's, I'm concerned.
Aaron?
Is there another option?
Well, there are other options that we've discussed even tonight. One of the problems I mentioned to you was that we've had 18 turnovers just this year.
We had 2 more quit today.
20. So let's say that we didn't even replace any of them. That would more than pay for this commitment. But the other piece that I think we need to think about is the use of the rainy day funds. Early on, we talked about the cash balance back in the days when we could maintain a cash balance. We talked about that cash balance being sufficient to carry on as usual when funding changed. And this was clear back when I first came on, when we still had the minimum funding guarantee. And we were maintaining this cash balance so that when that funding disappeared, and we knew it would at some point, we could use that cash balance to offset the negative consequences of the loss of those funds. We never did that. We have been maintaining a cash balance, or I shouldn't say that, a balanced budget, as far along as we could, except when in the year that we received that notification on December 31st, that we were going to be reduced by over $1 million, almost $2 million. Aside from that, we've not dipped into that cash balance to maintain our current plan. Now, last year, what we did was to commit to one of the most, I would say, the most far-reaching, broad-based reorganization plans that we've ever had here. My tenure doesn't go back that far, but I don't know that we've ever done anything quite as widespread as we did last year. And to move forward and say that we're going to maintain a cash balance and go ahead and let what we've put together be fragmented out, I think calls into question why we keep that cash balance. You also have to remember we still have $1 million cash balance in our reserve in transportation. That we have held back for those purposes. So it's not as though we don't have the means to do this. Is it a risk? Well, of course it's a risk. I don't feel good about it either, that we are using what would be a savings to maintain our plan. But I do feel confident that our plan is of such quality that we should look at doing something a little outside our comfort zone to maintain it. It certainly took us out of our comfort zone to recommend and implement the plan. So do I feel very good about looking 3 years out and saying that we are going to have it exactly as it's on paper? I can't say that I do either. But I'm not even so sure that in 2013, even this plan, I think our operating balance in the rainy day fund will be greater than $2,600,000. I think we'll have more there.
Well, the other thing, too, getting back to the paraprofessional raise, one of the things that does happen with teachers, when you have someone coming in and out of your classroom, you train a new person to help you out in your classroom, and all of a sudden they're gone, a new person comes in, you have to start that retraining. It takes a lot of teachers' time to do that, and I know it's very, very frustrating right now for a lot of our teachers. So I have no issue with giving them what they need, and so that we can be competitive with the people around us. But I get worried when we start getting down that low and all the unknowns out there right now in the economic world.
Yeah.
Well, can I make a suggestion that we do something? Let's give them a big stipend. I mean, if they're currently employed now and they receive, I don't know, a $700 stipend, I mean, that's going to show them that we appreciate them, and then surely that gives us time to draft a plan. And I mean, I'm not trying to short the paraprofessionals or preschool instructors at all.
Doesn't help when trying to hire.
Yeah, that's the only problem. It doesn't help
Well,
us with
but it
hiring.
also gives us a time to put together a plan that gives us a balanced budget without using our rainy day fund, and I just think I think we could work towards and get the common goal. I mean, I did try to talk to you about this ahead of time, but your time got busy, and so I'm not trying to throw any curveballs, but I mean, it's a concern for me. I just don't feel like that we've got. I don't feel like I've got the right information that I can agree with it as it is. So, is there an alternative that we could do while we develop a plan to get
It's not the recommendation.
to
though.
the salary? I mean, we have $100,000 in theoretical cash that is unappropriated this year. Now, I also understand that $100,000, part of the things that helped me try to understand where you're going is what is not spent, or if that number becomes larger, will sweep to the cash balance or to the rainy day fund.
Correct.
So it becomes a question of terminology and and that. But I think we can get to where you want. I just would like to get there a little differently is all. So.
Do we have a motion on the floor?
There is a motion on the floor.
I was just on, whatever you guys want to do, however you want to, if you want to take it to vote, that's fine. If you want to, it's up to you.
Up to who?
We have a motion on the floor.
I know
There is
we
a motion
do.
on the
Either
floor,
have to
so we
vote
have.
Well, or pull the motion, and I don't,
Or you could amend the motion and say, let's use the cash balance, issue the stipend, make it reawarding.
No,
and then
because
we come
that's
back.
a whole different recommendation. I don't think you can actually do that.
okay. The motion's on the floor. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Could we post?
No.
I
mean,
oppose.
yes.
Okay. Can we have a show of hands then?
Aye.
Pam, it's Suzanne, Dixie, Aaron, Pat, and Kelly. Aye. Nay, Linda, and Jeff. Thank you.
May I add something? Just
No. Go right ahead,
I'm going
Aaron.
to. What the public will see and know is that there was a 5-2 vote right now. Okay? I hope that they also understand that the 2 votes against it were not against giving those classified groups or those groups a raise. It was some uncertainty on how it would be done to protect, whatever financial integrity that we have for something that we have maintained for some time. And I just want to be very clear that those 2 votes that went against it were not against the raise. It was just, again, the timing of it right now with some uncertainty. And I felt I wanted to say that, too.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
Well, and I will also say that I heard the opposition very loud and clear, and we are committed to operating with fiscal prudence and integrity, and we'll prove that as time goes on.
Thank you.
And I hope that we really work to build the enrollment to the 20 and start marketing, because this has to be, I think this vote was also based on the trust of that plan.
Absolutely.
And I think that's hugely important, but we have to act on that as well.
On to the master plan and a projects update.
And we turn to Mr. Mays for that update.
Thank you very much to allow me to give you this update on our projects that we have under construction. The Dennis Gymnasium, we've completed all the concrete footings as of today, and they started the block foundation. And that one of the milestones that we working on is when we get the pre-engineered metal building, and that is scheduled to start erection on January the 11th. Before we get there, we have to run up all the outside walls first, except for the brick. We're going to run all the block walls, so that then we can set the structure inside. And then on February the 22nd, we're looking to put the wood floor down, which is another milestone. But the project completion is scheduled for April the 5th. And we've worked out an arrangement with the contractors that if they do not get a full 5-day work week, that they will work Saturday and Sunday to make up the day or 2 that they've lost. And so last week they knew the weather report said it was going to rain on Monday, so they worked last Saturday, and it did rain on Monday. So they are very aware of the schedule, and everything is really going good. On the Ron Robinson Memorial, we've mentioned in the past that we didn't want to start that until we had all the materials, so that once we started it, there weren't any delays. So now I can tell you that we are scheduled to start that the Monday after Thanksgiving break. And we've talked to Mrs. Gibbs. We've talked about how we're going to bring the students in, because that entrance will be totally closed. The schedule then would be for that to be completed on December the 19th.
Wow.
So that when they come back from winter break, it'll be 100% completed and ready for them to use that entrance. So you'll start to see a change there within the next couple weeks. And then at Crestdale, the gymnasium is scheduled to be completed on the 21st, next Wednesday, and then right after Thanksgiving break on the 26th, it'll be turned over to Mrs. Hobbs, and we'll be ready to start using the gym. At this point, it's all painted inside. We have the heating and air conditioning equipment's installed. We're just doing some minor work and some punch list items. And then the total project, we just have a few minor punch list items of the whole project that they're working and completing those, and they do those after hours and on Saturdays. So that I'm looking for the basically the total project to be done by the end of November, first couple of days of December, and the contract schedule is February. So you can see that we've made pretty good progress. Then I would like to have the board, with Dr. Borf and everybody's permission, to have a school board meeting there, either the last board meeting in January or one of the two meetings in February, and then let the contractors then turn the building over to you, and you accept the building, and you're able to walk through and see the project as would be totally completed.
It's a nice idea.
Kind of a rededication
Right.
meeting.
We would have dedication plaque and do the whole thing at that particular time.
With an invitation going out to all former students and families?
Yeah.
and-
It's really
Come
nice
to
that
our
that
board
building is
meeting.
going to be done when they come back from Christmas. Well, before that, but I mean, it's just,
Aaron?
Did you attend the red-white scrimmage?
Do what?
Was there a red-white scrimmage, basketball scrimmage there at
Yes, there
Hibbert?
was.
At Hibbert, right?
Did anybody attend? I just, Mike,
I was there.
how was the
Full.
park? How was, it was full?
Yes.
Oh, it was
Okay.
packed.
So was the parking.
Okay, all right. I didn't get to attend, but
It looked great, though, with every, it was
I
so
knew that there were a
full.
lot of people who were going. There was some excitement there, and I know that we're utilizing that building more than just...
Every bleacher seat was full, and there's standing room and sitting along the stage and along one wall from 6 o'clock until about 7:45 or 8 o'clock. Everybody stayed. They didn't leave when their
Nope.
child was done, like the 7th and 8th graders were first.
Right.
So you would think when they were done, their parents would leave. They stayed. And it was a really, really nice program and a great utilization of that gym.
I wanted to ask about parking at Dennis. I can't remember what we said about parking at Dennis, but it's an issue now. And it will be if that gym is utilized the same way that
Yeah.
What we're planning on doing is hopefully we can look at renovating the first floor of Dennis next summer, next year. And with that project, we would redo the parking and the bus drop off and pick
Yeah,
up.
the buses.
So that is a serious issue there, and we
Yeah.
would take care of that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mays.
Okay, thank you.
Now we're on to our work session, which is a board committee discussion that comes from our last board meeting. Dr. Borf wasn't here, and Jeff brought up the prospective committees and had some suggestions, and Dr. Borf watched our conversation and came up with, did some investigating and came up with a plan to discuss. We aren't taking action on this tonight, we're just talking about it.
I did watch that meeting. Actually, not attending a meeting and watching it on tape, you see some things you probably wouldn't have seen if you were participating.
Do we want to know what
Is
you
that
saw?
a plus or a minus?
Okay, I'm gonna evaluation not included.
No, I thought it was a really good conversation about what's desirable in the way of committee work and why we would want it. What I heard was, and this is This was, I think Jeff had 3 of these, but Pat also had one of these concerns. But there was discussion around the table about this. Transparency in decision-making, and committee work is very important. Equity in communication among the board members. In other words, there was a concern that in some of these committees, there are certain things known by some board members, and because of the communication process, not everyone has that same depth of knowledge or breadth of knowledge. There was also the need for adequate preparation. There has to be knowledge for decision-making. And then also an avoidance of studying topics too narrowly. The idea was that sometimes committees are structured in such a way that there is too narrow. There's too narrow a study, which almost works against good governance and decision-making. Okay, so I heard those comments, and what I did was to return to some readings that I had done a few years ago using Paul Houston and Doug Eady's work on governance, board relationships with superintendents and vice versa, and then governance structures. What they proposed is deceptively simple. In many places, you have committees that boards use. You might have a curriculum committee, a facilities committee. You might have finance committee, policy committee. Technology. And we've had some of these now and then and here and there. But what I'm presenting tonight would be something that encompasses all that. It addresses the 4 concerns that we talked about, and it still accomplishes, in fact, it may reinforce efficiency in board governance. You have to remember that one of the functions of a board is to efficiently become effective decision makers. And there are very few boards where everybody is on every committee. But hearing that that's one of the desires, that's part of the recommendation. What we have in this recommendation is a performance oversight and evaluation committee. This committee would look at the here and now, but its function would be looking at educational issues, administrative issues, financial issues, facilities, instruction issues. All of those topics would be considered. And it could be that all those topics would be brought up every single month. I could also see times when some of those topics wouldn't be brought up in particular months. Each committee would be populated by 2 board members. One of the board members would be chairperson. And because this is a board committee rather than a superintendent committee, it would be run by the open door law. It would be advertised. There would be minutes, and it would be open to the public. The board chairperson would be assisted in this committee by an administrative team member or team leader. The administrative team leader would be responsible for working with the chair to keep that agenda consistent with the purpose of the committee. And that team leader would be responsible for going out and doing the research, gathering the data, enlisting the aid of other staff people. But you'd also have an REA appointed teacher to be a part of this committee, and you could have, you would also have someone from the community. Now these are just ideas, but this would make a nice committee. There would also be a planning and development committee. That would be a future orientation. And the performance oversight and evaluation would look at the here and now. It would look at those areas that I was talking about. But the planning and development committee, composed by almost the same type of structure, would look at those same issues looking forward. instead of looking at the here and now. The idea is that the Performance Oversight and Evaluation Committee would recommend issues for the Planning and Development Committee. So in such a way, there might be communication directly to the Planning and Development Committee, but there also would be reports to the Board Development and Management Committee. There would be reports going from both committees to the Board Development and Management. The Board Development and Management Committee looks very much like an executive committee with some assistants. The executive committee would be the president, the vice president, the secretary, and the two chairpeople, one of the Performance Oversight and Evaluation, one of the Planning and Development. Now, because this is an open committee or an open meeting type arrangement, open door law, you could have as many as all board members at every meeting of the Board Development and Management. Actually, you could have a room full of people at every single one of those. I don't know that that's the way it would be. But the Board Development and Management Committee would then be responsible for working to bring agenda items to the board meetings. Remember that in committee work, you don't make decisions. The board as a whole, in its regular meeting, makes the decisions, takes the votes and makes the decisions. That would not change. This would involve every board member, and because the same issues are discussed from one committee to another, every committee member has exposure to the same issues, the same ideas and discussions. It comes again to the Board Development Management, which is one more opportunity for these discussions to take place out of committee. And then, of course, at the board meetings, you have those decisions being made. Presentations would be a lot more from board members in the future at board meetings than they are from administration. Board members would be responsible for conducting a lot more of their own meeting. And the administrators would take on a support role for the board members, and particularly the chair people. Now, I've also recommended for your consideration a change in just the agenda, not the agenda, the calendar for the board. As I see it, and I could be wrong, maybe you'd like to take on a lot more obligations than I think you have capacity to do. But I think you would have to establish one board meeting per month. And what my recommendation would be that fourth Wednesday. Maintain the fourth Wednesday as your board meeting. And instead of having a board meeting on the second Wednesday of the month, make that your Board Development and Management Committee meeting. It would be open to the public, much as a board meeting is right now. Wouldn't necessarily have to be at 6:30 in the evening. It could be earlier. It could be whatever time you set. But then your Performance Oversight and Evaluation Committee and your Planning and Development Committees would meet a week before that. And this could be also determined at some other point when they would be meeting. But it would be important for them all not to meet, or for any not to meet at the same time. Because if you met at the same time, let's say the two committees met at the same time, that would restrict the attendance at those meetings of board members. And remember, one of the pieces is to make sure that all board members have as much exposure to these conversations as any other board member would. So it's important to have these at different times. It looks like it might be a radical departure from where you are, and I don't know, I suppose you could make that case, but it also could move you a lot closer to your objectives, which would be everyone being a part of every discussion, everyone being better informed, and having board members more in charge of the meeting as opposed to a committee of school officials setting those conversations and pretty much moving those in the direction that we've come to expect. I would envision that for the Board Development and Management Committee, I would be the team leader working with the board chair to make that happen. For the Performance Oversight and Evaluation Committee, that could be Mr. Millis. It might be Bob Coddington, or it could, I'm not sure which one that would be. Board Planning and Development, same thing. Mr. Millis, maybe Bob, maybe myself. The Performance Oversight and Evaluation Committee has a lot more to do with operations. I could see Bob Coddington being that team leader, but there's nothing to say that Mr. Millis and I wouldn't be team leaders for all those committees. So it's just something for you to chew on and think about. I'm not recommending anything tonight, just bringing it up for conversation.
One thing, we've been talking about doing committees now ever since, for the past 5 years.
Yes.
And I know Pat and Suzanne talked about it when Suzanne was president, and when I became president, I tried to work something out, and it just has never gelled. But I get so many recommendations comments, I guess, from other board members about how they feel like they're not connected. And so I'm hoping that we can work something out here, because it looks like this encompasses the whole board and involves a lot of communication, and I think that would be a real positive for us. Pat?
I went back to look at the original Doug Eady stuff that we pulled out. It has coffee stains and so forth. So I have a couple of comments, couple of thoughts. The Board Management Committee, the Board Development and Management, when you look at that, it has only 5 people officially on it. That means 2 people are really left out, and that bothered me. But when I went back to Doug Eady, and Doug Eady was saying that in those the committees, the 2 Planning and Development and Performance Oversight, that the members of the Executive Committee, probably the vice president and secretary, would act as chairs of each of those. And so then each of those committees would have 2 other board members plus one of the executive committee folks, so that there would be 3 board members. And then when you get down to the board development and management, that either becomes the executive committee or the entire board as a work session on the first Wednesday night, which might do that. But when I went back to look at Doug Eady's work, because it concerned me a little bit that there was a possibility that only 5 board members would be at that meeting, even though others would be invited. The other 5 had a specific role, and so that bothered me.
It did show board vice president, board secretary, and the board president consists of. On the board development and management.
Right. My point is, on the other committees, that, like the board vice president would be chair of one of those committees, secretary of the other committee, and then 2 other members of the board, so that all of us would be on a committee.
Okay, I see what
But I didn't necessarily recommend that.
I know.
I think that could be an option.
That when I went back to the Doug Eady stuff, that seemed a little more equitable to me as I was thinking about it. A little easier to do the equity of communication that I think we were talking about last week.
And I think it's interesting, and I think it would be interesting to do, but it's also a lot more work.
Very time consuming.
And for people who have full-time jobs, there's some of us that, we would be glad to participate, but people with full-time jobs, I think it would be a hardship if you do it right. So that's...
When we come down to how do you balance that?
Right.
Because we keep saying we need more time to talk, we need more of this kind of stuff.
And the other thing,
And then
it's also takes more time away from the administrative staff, where right now at critical times in education, they need to be doing their stuff.
It would change, and I didn't talk about that, but it would change the way we go about our business too, because we would have to shift some of our meetings to look at support roles to the board. I don't know that that's such a bad thing, though. But it would change the way we view our challenges and how we structure our
And you're making
plans.
Recommendations.
Right, that's right.
Right. Now they bring recommendations for us to discuss. This, from what I can read from Doug Eady's work, is these groups create the ideas that then generate the recommendations from you. So it almost adds a step from here to there and back again.
Well, and the other thing too, if you're not in the school system, then you don't always have the right knowledge base, I don't think, to be bringing those kind of decisions to fruition. So, not that you shouldn't make recommendations at times, but I just see like things getting tangled. I think it could get messy at times. But
Jeff?
Well, when I first read it, I liked Dr. Boer's term, what did you say, deceptively simple?
Yeah.
I first read it and I thought extremely complicated. But the board development and management was my biggest hang-up, because I think that should commit, that goes to you keep using the terms committee of the whole. Well, that's what we are as a board. We're a committee of the whole. So whether this is what flushes out, and I think that board development and management committee should consist of all 7 members, period. I do think this I could see some simplicity. I actually think this would be more confusing, maybe, because you have a lot of the same topics in the two different, or they are the same topics in the two different.
By design.
And I would think that, I'm thinking of technology. That's a now and a future. And I noticed in the literature that you provided that then that would be the role of the Board Development and Management Committee to decide which way it went. But I guess my thought was a little bit more simplistic, because as I was doing research on committees, there's some things that I think that I know would help me. I can't speak for whether it would help other board members or not, but I think each different board member has a different level of information that they would like to have. What they feel comfortable with. You've experienced that. That's no secret. So the way that we go about collecting data and the way that we go about coming to creating a recommendation, I don't feel the board has I feel that we should do a better job of directing the role of what the committee work is. I think we should do a better job of what information are we trying to get out of the committee. I think that committees should be created in such that, they're more board focused, and I don't think our committees are board focused. I think what I call the ad hoc or the superintendent committees, I think you need to have those. I think those help you run the school system. But I don't think they're good for board member information, because I think of the ad hoc committees that we have now, and I haven't been to the last couple technology ones, but there's nothing in the technology meeting that's driven by what does the board want. In your discussion, you're putting together a technology plan. I'm sorry, Rob, I'm picking on you because you're the one I'm involved with. But it's a plan that he comes to the meeting, he speaks for an hour. It really doesn't matter what the data is, but it isn't anything that's driven from what information does the board need. I think those committees serve two different purposes. The information that he has in his committee, in his technology plan, I think should be more detailed and more how it's going to work within the system. I think the information I need is, all right, how are we going to train our staff? How are we going to assess it? How are we going to use the data? And how are we going to pay for it? He's going to be worried about how are we going to get it in the teachers' hands? How are we going to train the teachers? How are we going to use it in curriculum? Which may be part of an education committee. It may be part of something else. So the way that the board uses committees now, I don't think serves the board's purpose. Now, I could be wrong, but this is from me. So the charge of the committee from a board perspective, I guess, is in a summary, I think will be a little different. I think it's nice that we don't do this. I don't do this. Suzanne on her marketing. We've done no report back to the board on what we've been talking about for the last 6 months. I mean, we had a presentation 6 months ago on an initial draft plan. You had a lot of good conversation, but it hasn't been back. And then in the board update this last Friday, we get this $3 million expense on iPads on we want to do for a proposed three-year plan. So I'm thinking, wow, that's a big jump from point A to point B. Because now my questions are really starting to fire. So I guess I think the big change in the corporation from the philosophy that we use is standing committees for the purpose of the board versus superintendent committees and ad hoc committees for the purpose of the administration aren't equal, and I'd like to see that separation. So I've been doing a lot of reading, a lot of research, and I was just thinking about, I'm thinking of a standing committee, and we have a finance committee, and we have a policy committee, and a marketing committee, and that's it. Well, there's tons of topics. I mean, if you really start thinking about it, audit committee. The more I read about an audit committee, boy, I really like this one, because an audit committee, there's an external auditor, actually an internal auditor, but that reports directly to the school board. So our finance questions, our reports, that's a whole different concept. Yeah. So if you look at what a definition of an audit committee is, there's a lot of school corporations in the system that use an audit committee. You got communications, you got finance, you got long-range planning, you got policy, you got student performance, personnel, negotiations, curriculum, and/or teaching and learning, superintendent evaluations, board development, evaluations as far as programs, goals, data, that type of stuff, executive, fundraising. I mean, so as I was going through reading the different committees that different school corporations across the United States are using, it's vast. Then the next question is, we need to define what committees serve us and the role and the focus of the committee. So I think when I was looking at creating committees, I'm thinking, let's create standing committees that are driven by board policy with specific purposes. And that, to me, makes more sense. To me, that's more simple. If they're a standing committee and we've got 2 or 5 or whatever, it doesn't make any difference. That doesn't mean that you couldn't create any ad hoc committee that you needed, but it gives us the opportunity to put some focus on what do we consider for the next year or 2 or 3 most important, because we can't cover everything. We like to think
You keep saying that you would use a standing committee. Do you not see that those are standing committees?
Well, I do, and that's one of the things I liked about what you given us as a proposal is that was in the direction of a big change from what we've done historically in the past. I think that gives you the option that I may not want to be on a technology committee maybe, but if I was a board member, I would like to know that meeting's going on, because if you're talking about funding iPads tonight, I may want, as a board member, want to attend that meeting. So yes, I do see those as standing committees, and that supports kind of to the change that I want to go to. I just think as I was looking through and I was reading some articles in the American Association of School Administrators, I'm thinking, wow. It talks about Don McAdams has done a lot of writing on committees and the functions and I think, and I recommend the book that he wrote, What School Boards Can Do. I think it's a great book. But I guess I was thinking as we took a look at these committees, I guess I was thinking more simple, I think there's some ones that are important. I think long-range planning and for the school corporation. What happens if we gain 500 students? What happens if we lose 500 students? I think that's an important component.
Isn't that what the planning and development was?
So, but I think what I guess if we just, the standing committee is created by the policy, and I just think is more simplistic, and it's defined. And here, these committees, the standing committees that are created by policy are these three. They're not. I guess it takes, whether it's 5 members or 7 members, it takes the board development and management committee.
I think you might be talking about ad hoc committees, about the development of ad hoc committees.
Which is, I thought, what you wanted to get away from.
I'm not
did
talking
too.
ad hoc. I'm talking standing committees. I mean, standing finance committee is a standing long range, and have a board chair. I mean, I like the fact that you have a board chair and a.
Okay,
Linda?
Okay, here are my thoughts for whatever they're worth. First of all, I would like to see us as a board reach consensus on whatever we decide to do. Not a vote, consensus. And we've all been trained, sort of trained, and we need to practice that. Secondly, I think that what Dr. Borf gave us was a good beginning, but I think we need to take those and we need to have a very thorough discussion of the information that he's given us, and we need to make them our own. And we need to, if we, as a group, if we decide, oh, this is going to work for us, then fine. But if we feel that there are changes that need to be made to help us become more effective and more efficient, then I think we should do that. Because honestly, it's real hard to take somebody else's work and make it work for you when you don't have the input and so forth. So that's what I would like to see happen. I don't know that we are ready to make a decision tonight.
I wasn't planning on making a decision tonight. This is just a discussion, and I agree, we need to have more discussion about it.
I mean, that's what I would like to see happen. I would like for us to kind of take each one and kind of pull it apart and discuss what it means for us. And because honestly, when I read them, it was pretty mind-boggling for me. But then again, lots of things are mind-boggling for me.
Thank you for all the work you did on this, too. I can tell a lot of work went into it, so. Okay, we will
And
have.
We've got some good research. And back when Suzanne and I were working on this, there's some other articles and stuff, too.
Well, and maybe it would be a good idea for
We need to
us
share some of those.
to get the research and I mean, I know I went online and looked up Doug Eady, and I found some things on YouTube that I watched and listened to, and so I would have a little bit of background. So maybe we need.
I think we ought to end this conversation with the Dave Stidham question. What problem are we trying to solve with this committee structure?
Four problems
But I
that were
think
brought
there
up
are
at the
more.
last
I
meeting.
think there are more questions, but
Well, I guess
will it solve the problem?
I'm just going back to I'm trying to figure out, and I said this at the last meeting. I just like to figure out some way as a board member that I can try to grasp everything, not every detail, but a picture. I mean, if we're going to talk about picking on iPads again, because that was the last thing in the up. If I'm going to talk about approving $3 million in iPads, well, then there's a lot of other things that we've got to consider in that as well. What other things in our school system do we need to support?
Thank you, everyone, for that discussion. Let's move on to press conference. Does anyone have any questions out there? Mr. Zimmerman?
Thank you.
And then on to
Consent?
consent items. Yeah, I heard somebody say something, so I was...
Okay, we have approval of minutes from the October 24th board meeting and executive session. Recommendation from Human Resources, and I believe there is an addendum. It's been posted to the web. I think you have a copy of all that. Facilities Hibbard deduct change order for 9.03, and in 9.04, a Hibbard add change order. Those 4 items I recommend for approval under consent tonight.
Can I hear a motion to accept the consent items as presented? Jeff Slifer makes the motion and Dixie Robinson seconds the motion. Any comments and questions? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Consent items are passed. So now we're on to our second public commentary. There's a gentleman in our audience. Did you have any questions, sir?
He's the new reporter.
He's another media person.
Okay, so then I need to go back to press conference, since we do have another press out there, but I guess there are no questions. Follow up on old business? Pat?
I didn't know whether to put this under old business or celebration. Having had finally an opportunity to read the entire Race to the Top grant, we need to say congratulations and thank you to the people who put that grant together. That's an amazing thing. But in terms of old business, I guess I'm curious because it fits our strategic plan. How can we help start implementing some of the elements of Race to the Top without that grant? So that's a rhetorical question to put on our agenda, because I think we really do need to look at a number of the pieces in there, the mentoring, the personal learning plan, and a lot of the things that we learned from Safe School, Healthy Students. It really was very well done and could go a long way to revolutionizing 5 through 12. So how we do that, I don't know, and it's not worth discussion this evening, but I want to make sure it gets on an agenda
Certainly.
to talk about how we can do it, even if we don't get that Race to the Top grant.
Okay, any other old business? On to superintendent and board reports, reflections, and celebrations. Celebrated American Education Week. Dixie?
I think we should congratulate Kelly Andrews on being named Elementary Principal of the Year of District
6. District 6.
Okay. And also, I wanted to comment on the kids at RHS during the Veterans Day Assembly
goodness,
were
yes.
absolutely fabulous.
Yes, they were.
And again, when I walked in the high school, doors were opened for me by students. I was spoken to by every student as I walked down the hall, and that says a lot for RHS kids.
They were so respectful.
Yes.
They
I do
were
have
great.
one other
Pat?
celebration. I wanted to celebrate our Magna nomination. That was very well done and very well written. Thank you.
We'll
Let's
keep
just
our
hope we
fingers
get it.
crossed.
All right. Now we're over to a review of tentative meeting agenda for November 28th.
There's an item that doesn't appear on that tentative agenda, and I wanted to highlight that. I don't believe it does. Let me get this a little bigger for myself. Before I forget, it goes right to what Pat was just talking about. We will be bringing for discussion the idea of financing some projects through the means of extending our tax rate that we have. We're going to be talking about that, not any recommendation coming up, but we have a bond issue that's coming off at test that was dedicated to test, and we have a means of maintaining a tax rate for the next few years and thereby enabling us to take on some projects that would, for example, the dentist project, and we'll get around to that next week or next board meeting, but that doesn't appear on this, and I wanted to highlight that. It also could address the technology issue. So That and the strategic plan will be under reports. Student transit will be a report. Actually, the contract with student transit will be a report. Action items include the receipt of donations, the policy, second reading, and adoption that we talked about tonight. The 2013-14 school calendar will be discussed again. It could be an action item at the next meeting. It's either going to be an action item at the next meeting or at the December meeting. Press conference, approval of minutes, human resources, accounts payable, filing of reports. The rest of that would be as we saw tonight.
Thank you.
Question
Jeff?
on the agenda.
Uh-huh.
Student transit, when you say it'll be is it the proposed contract that's going to go out for bids, or?
No. Well, it could be. I mean, we may end up being there, but it's more like where we are with that whole process, and what we might see as the next course of events in that process.
So at that point, we'll determine whether it's going to go out for bids or not.
I think that would be in a subsequent board meeting, but yeah, we'll talk about that.
Because it expires on 12/31, right?
I don't know if Ron Cross will be a part of that conversation too. So
Having
we'll
that reviewed from its ongoing. We're not without a contract. It's just where we are in that contract. It was a 5-year contract with automatic renewals if we haven't given stuff. So we're
Automatic extensions for a year, and then ended December 31st.
So we'll bring some of that up for discussion.
Okay. Have a good evening.